Chapter 535. As the second dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Wuxia Xianxia was not famous for his martial arts. Instead, he was famous for his brains. In fact, Wuxia Xianxia did not have much martial arts. He was only half a martial arts grandmaster. It was said that Wuxia Xianxia was half a martial arts grandmaster because he made a mistake when he was trying to break through to the true pellet realm, causing his true pellet to be destroyed. However, he did not die. Instead, he retained some of his strength. He was stronger than ordinary oneness of heaven and man realm martial artists, but not as strong as a grandmaster with the true pellet realm. Therefore, he was considered half a martial arts grandmaster. Of course, martial arts was just the icing on the cake for Wuxia Xianxia. What Wuxia Xianxia was really good at was not martial arts. Wuxia Xianxia was known as half a day's fortune teller. It meant that man's fortune teller was not as good as God's fortune teller. Wuxia Xianxia was a man, so naturally, he was not as good as God's fortune teller. However, he had half the strength of God's fortune teller. Therefore, he was known as half a day's fortune teller. His attainments in divination were comparable to those Taoist and Buddhist sect grandmasters who studied karma. Moreover, Wuxia Xianxia was not only good at divination, but he was also good at medicine, array, and other miscellaneous skills. In the Blue Dragon Society, although Tiannan was the second dragon head, Wuxia Xianxia was in charge of 99% of the matters. Tiannan did not understand those chores, and he was too lazy to bother himself with them. Therefore, in the Blue Dragon Society, Wuxia Xianxia's prestige was not inferior to Tiannan's. If Wuxia Xianxia was not supporting the Blue Dragon Society, with Tiannan's crazy personality, the Blue Dragon Society would have been torn apart by him. Moreover, Wuxia Xianxia was good at judging people. Many of the top killers in the Blue Dragon Society were discovered by Wuxia Xianxia. For example, Han Kuai and Song Xiao. Even Wuxia Xianxia was no match for the two of them when they joined forces. However, when they had just reached the physical invulnerability realm, Wuxia Xianxia had taken a liking to them at first glance. He had imparted martial arts to them based on their personalities and had given them pointers and support. Although Wuxia Xianxia's strength was not great, that was because his martial Dao aptitude was too poor. It was useless even if he had countless heaven and earth treasures to make up for it. However, his understanding and attainments in martial Dao were stronger than most martial Dao masters. It could be said that Wuxia Xianxia was the one who created Han Kuai and Song Xiao. That was why these two were so obedient to Wuxia Xianxia's adopted daughter, Mu Zi. To them, their first loyalty was to Wuxia Xianxia, followed by Tiannan. The Azure Dragon Society could only be ranked third. After hearing this, Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Since you have become Wuxia Xianxia's daughter, why did you come to the Northern Yen?" And Han Kuai and Song Xiao, these two are the top killers in the Blue Dragon Society, the four blood killers. Why did they come here to be branch leaders? Isn't this a waste? The true elites of the Blue Dragon Society were not in the 36 Big Dipper divisions, but in the headquarters. Originally, the Sin branch leader came from the headquarters, but he was demoted to the Sin branch to be a branch leader. However, he always wanted to return to the headquarters. For Han Kuai and Song Xiao, with their strength, coming to the Northern Yen to be a branch leader was definitely a demotion. Mu Zi smiled bitterly and shook her head. It's because my adoptive father offended the great dragon head and is now in seclusion as punishment. Because Uncle Song and Uncle Han are my adoptive father's people, they were also demoted to the Northern Yen. With that, Mu Zi told Chu Xiu everything that had happened in the Blue Dragon Society. She did not hide anything. The great dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Crescent Green Dragon, Tiannan, was very famous in the pugilistic world. However, he was arrogant, and willful. In the past, because the Blue Dragon Society's Sin branch was destroyed, this bastard actually went to the Great Light Temple and fought with the Seed of Delusion Zen Hall's 9 Wonders Dragon Tree, Su Yun. He directly put on a stance that said he would not rest until one of them died, and actually forced the Great Light Temple to stop. This matter was quite famous. However, from Wuxia Xianxia's point of view, it was fine for Butiannan to go crazy once in a while. However, if Butiannan went crazy every time, it would only put the Blue Dragon Society in danger. Muzi shook her head and said, "Adoptive father told me that the great dragon head is a little too arrogant and can't see itself clearly. Not long ago, the great dragon head actually went to provoke the Vermilion Bird Pavilion of Western Chu, which doesn't have much of a grudge against the Blue Dragon Society. This caused both sides to become enemies, and the great dragon head also revealed that the Blue Dragon Society wants to expand. The Blue Dragon Society had been passed down for so many years. As long as they were a sword in the hands of the pugilistic world, then as long as there were disputes and killings in the pugilistic world, the Blue Dragon Society would continue to exist. But now, according to the Great Dragon Head, the Blue Dragon Society shouldn't just be a sword in the hands of others, but a sword wielder. Adoptive father's meaning was that if the Blue Dragon Society wanted to be a sword wielder, it was fine. However, with the many people that the Blue Dragon Society had killed over the years, the Blue Dragon Society needed to have the strength to wield the sword. Otherwise, the Blue Dragon Society would be suppressed by the majority of the pugilistic world. And the current Blue Dragon Society clearly didn't have this kind of strength. During the discussion at the headquarters, the Great Dragon Head and Adoptive Father started to quarrel over this matter. Even the people who supported the Great Dragon Head and Adoptive Father were arguing, and it almost turned into an internal fight. For the sake of the Blue Dragon Society's future, Adoptive Father could only take the initiative to retreat. However, in the end, he was stripped of most of his power by the Great Dragon Head and was ordered to reflect on his mistakes. As for the powerful assassins in the headquarters like Uncle Han and Uncle Song, they were demoted to other places. Adoptive Father was worried that I wouldn't be safe in the headquarters, so he let me follow Uncle Han and Uncle Song to Northern Yen. With the two of them around, even if a martial arts grandmaster were to make a move, they would be able to protect me. After hearing Muzi's words, Chu Xiu really didn't expect such a big change to happen in the Blue Dragon Society. However, the Blue Dragon Society's matter was generally a power struggle. No one was right or wrong. Duanmu Qianshan's suggestion was right for the current Blue Dragon Society. The Blue Dragon Society was an assassin organization. The righteous path could use it, the demonic path could use it, you could use it, and I could also use it. Therefore, as long as the Blue Dragon Society didn't go too far, the people of the pugilistic world could tolerate it. After all, everyone knew that as long as there were grudges and killings in the pugilistic world, even if the Blue Dragon Society didn't exist, there would still be the White Dragon Society and the Black Dragon Society. However, if the Blue Dragon Society revealed its ambition to expand, then based on the people the Blue Dragon Society had killed over the years and the karma they had sown, it wouldn't be wrong to say that they would become the enemy of the whole world. The moon-worshipping cult was a big sect of the demonic path. Why did they openly become neighbors with the Longhu Mountain Celestial Master Mansion? It was all because of the peerless expert Yi Xiaonan. The entire moon-worshipping cult had countless experts. Many people in the pugilistic world knew that the Yinma clan still had the beautiful dream of reviving the Kunlun devil cult. Why didn't they go all out to kill the Yinma clan? It was because there were still some old monsters in the Yinma clan who hadn't died yet. Once they were forced into a life and death struggle, it would also set off a storm in the pugilistic world. Therefore, everything in this world depended on strength. The Blue Dragon Society wasn't weak, but they didn't have the qualifications to fight against so many enemies. Therefore, Duanmu Qianshan's suggestion was right for the long term of the Blue Dragon Society. But at the same time, what Butiannan did wasn't wrong. He was the Great Dragon Head, and he was the true leader of the Blue Dragon Society. In the end, his plan was criticized to be worthless. Even so, there were so many people in the Blue Dragon Society who supported Duanmu Qianshan despite his status as the Great Dragon Head. It would be strange if Butiannan wasn't afraid. Moreover, this time, Butiannan only chose to deprive Duanmu Qianshan of his power and suppress his subordinates. In Chu Xiu's opinion, this was already considered restraint. If it were Chu Xiu himself, if he had a subordinate like Duanmu Qianshan who was known as the Second Dragon Head, but his actual power had already threatened the existence of the Great Dragon Head, Chu Xiu reckoned that he would have already killed someone and cleaned up the place. Mu Zi paused for a moment before continuing. By the way, young Master Chu, the heavenly sin branch leader who tried to harm you in the past was recognized by the Grand Dragon Head because he killed someone from the White Tiger Hall. He was rewarded with a lot of medicinal pills and cultivation methods. He also used this opportunity to step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm and become one of the 5 dragon heads of our Green Dragon Society. The Sin Branch leader's real name is Duan Tianlang. He's despicable, shameless, and cunning. He doesn't stand on any side for his own benefit. Before he became a martial Dao Grandmaster, he wanted to seek refuge with my adoptive father. However, my adoptive father could see that he was up to no good and didn't accept him. He even taught him that the Blue Dragon Society only cares about strength. In the end, after he became a martial Dao Grandmaster, this person changed his stance and encouraged the Great Dragon Head to act recklessly and speak ill of my godfather. Now that the Great Dragon Head has become like this, Duan Tianlang is partly to blame. Chu Xiu was really surprised to hear news about the Sin Branch leader, Duan Tianlang. However, he didn't forget about Duan Tianlang. Chu Xiu had always been a narrow-minded person. Chu Xiu had to find a chance to avenge the enmity back then. As for Duan Tianlang's current achievements, Chu Xiu wasn't that surprised. Back when Duan Tianlang was the Sin Branch leader, his strength had already reached the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm. Now that he had the resources, it wouldn't be difficult for him to step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Moreover, this Duan Tianlang was indeed unscrupulous. Back then, for the sake of the blood jade exquisite treasure, he did not even hesitate to sacrifice Chu Xiu and other talented subordinates. To him, as long as he could obtain the treasure, sacrificing the entire heavenly sin branch would not be a problem. This person only cared about his own interests and had no principles to speak of. It wasn't surprising that he would do such a thing now. As for the messy affairs of the Blue Dragon Society, Mu Zi didn't hide it from Chu Xiu. Knowing that Chu Xiu was in danger now, Mu Zi said directly, "Young Master Chu, the morgue doesn't have many people to hunt you down now. After your last battle, I don't think anyone below the martial Dao Grandmaster level will dare to come and court death." Therefore, the morgue paid a huge sum of money to hire the Blue Dragon Society. Now, you can disguise yourself as a member of the Blue Dragon Society and leave Northern Yen. Even if the morgue intercepts you, they won't dare to investigate the Blue Dragon Society. Chapter 536. Rules were dead, but people were alive. There was no rule in this world that couldn't be broken. Even the strict rules of the Blue Dragon Society could be broken as long as no one investigated. Mu Zi was Wuxia Xianxia's adopted daughter. Han Ku and Song Shao were raised by Wuxia Xianxia. Now that Mu Zi wanted to help release Chu Xiu, the two didn't have any objections. Instead, they did their best to help. Chu Xiu didn't stand on ceremony with Mu Zi. He really needed to return to the Guanzhong torture room to heal his primordial spirit. Therefore, under Mu Zi's arrangement, Chu Xiu disguised himself as a member of the Blue Dragon Society. Han Ku and Song Shao escorted him safely out of Northern Yen. As for the Blue Dragon Society's reply to the Morgue village, it was even simpler. They didn't kill Lin Yi and let him escape. If the Morgue village doesn't revoke the bounty, we'll continue to hunt him down. If the Morgue village revokes the bounty, it doesn't matter. In any case, in the entire Northern Yen, Han Ku and Song Shao had the highest status. No one dared to snitch on them. At the border of Northern Yen and Guanzhong, Mu Zi looked at Chu Xiu and softly said, "Young master, have a safe journey." Mu Zi didn't know how she felt about Chu Xiu. Perhaps it was gratitude? Or something else? Mu Zi only knew that before she had acknowledged Wuxia Xianxia as her adoptive father, when she was fighting in the Jianghu, whenever she encountered a situation where she could not hold on, she would always remember what Chu Xiu had told her. You can't just live a life of death. Chu Xiu took off the Blue Dragon Society mask and handed it to Mu Zi and said, "I saved you in the past. Now you save me." You don't have to keep it in your heart. However, Miss Mu, your adopted father's situation in Blue Dragon Society isn't very optimistic. If there are any problems, you can come find me." With that said, Chu Xiu turned and left. Mu Zi looked at Chu Xiu's back with a strange look in her eyes. Chu Xiu saved her in the past. Now, she helped Chu Xiu. Although it seemed like the past had been settled, to Mu Zi, she still couldn't forget Chu Xiu. In the past, Chu Xiu had saved her in her hour of need. He had given her hope when she was at her most desperate. Now that she helped Chu Xiu, it could only be considered as the icing on the cake at most. Han Lei and Song Xiao didn't know Chu Xiu's identity, but Mu Zi knew that even if Han Lei and Song Xiao joined forces, the chances of them defeating Chu Xiu were not high. Although the two of them had the record of killing a martial Dao grandmaster together, only they knew how dangerous that battle was. On the other hand, Chu Xiu was an existence that killed a martial Dao grandmaster alone. Therefore, even without her help, it wasn't impossible for Chu Xiu to kill his way out by himself. At this moment, Song Xiao and Han Lei stood behind Mu Zi and looked at her with a strange look in their eyes. When Wuxia Xianxia took Mu Zi in as his adopted daughter, the main reason was because of her tenacity. It was as if she couldn't be cut down no matter what. Mu Zi's hardships in cultivating in the Blue Dragon Society and her decisiveness in carrying out missions made many men blush with shame. Therefore, Han Lei and Song Xiao were very surprised that Mu Zi would show such a hesitant expression to a man. Song Xiao said, "Miss, actually, it's fine if you like this Lin Yi. His identity is worthy of you. He's an elite of the Lurking Devil clan. Although he can't be seen most of the time, he still has strength and status. If you marry him, Lord Duanmu will also gain the support of the Lurking Devil clan." After a moment of silence, Mu Zi shook her head and said, "Uncle Song, don't tease me. You know that's not what I meant. Moreover, you don't know him. Something like a marriage alliance is not attractive to him." Han Lei and Song Xiao only knew about Lin Yi, but they didn't know that Chu Xiu and Lin Yi were the same person. Being ranked 4th on the Longhu leaderboard, Chu Xiu's status was only second to the likes of Zhang Qingjun and Zhong Xian. If nothing unexpected happened, Chu Xiu would definitely become a powerful figure in the pugilistic world in the future. For an existence like Chu Xiu, something like a marriage alliance was indeed not attractive. After pausing for a moment, Mu Zi said, "Uncle Han, Uncle Song, let's go. We can just brush off the Blue Dragon Society. The main thing is, we have to pay attention to foster father's side at all times." Han Lei and Song Xiao nodded their heads with a serious look on their faces. For the current Green Dragon Society, they were indeed in a very tricky situation. Even an outsider like Chu Xiu who only knew the general situation could see that the atmosphere in the Blue Dragon Society was not right, let alone the members of the Blue Dragon Society. Therefore, they didn't know how things would develop next. They could only take it one step at a time. After a few days, Chu Xiu had already left the northern Yan land and returned to Guangzhou. The Morgue village didn't send anyone to continue the chase. This wasn't because Nie Renlong had vented his anger, but because the people of the Morgue village thought that they had spent a lot of money to get Han Lei and Song Xiao to deal with Chu Xiu so they could save some energy and wait for Chu Xiu's death. However, at this time, Chu Xiu had already returned to the Guangzhou torture room. The first thing he did was to secretly contact Mei Qinglian. Previously, it was Mei Qinglian who took the initiative to find him, but this time, it was Chu Xiu who personally went to find Mei Qinglian instead of Chu Xiu. In her room, Mei Qinglian was surprised to see Chu Xiu appear. She asked, "How did you get out of the Morgue Manor and the encirclement of so many rogue cultivators so quickly?" Chu Xiu bluntly sat in front of Mei Qinglian and said, "I naturally have my own methods. However, Saintess, you've made me miserable this time. Being chased for thousands of miles doesn't feel good." Mei Qinglian spread her hands and said, "You can't blame me for this. Who knew that hypocrite Nie Renlong would care so much about his son? When Nie Donglu was killed by you, he went crazy. I also found 2 people to pick you up before. One of them is an acquaintance of yours, the 9 abandonment sword Xianxia of the Northern Yan royal family. He had a conflict with the Morgue village because of you last time. If he saves you this time, he can pretend to have a conflict with the Morgue village again and then save you indirectly. As for me, I secretly informed that kid Lu Jin and told him to receive you. That kid recently stepped into the real pellet state of martial Dao, and he is considered to be the real upper echelon of the phaseless demon sect. At this time, he is very arrogant, and he wants to find someone to test his skills. I simply let him go to Northern Yen. These 2 people, one in the open and one in the dark, should not be a problem to bring you out of Northern Yen, but I didn't expect you to come back quietly. Lu Jin was Mr. Lu of the phaseless demon sect. When Chu Xiu saw Mr. Lu last time, Mr. Lu was already half a step into the real pellet state. It was not surprising that Mr. Lu was promoted to the martial Dao Grand Master at this time. Chu Xiu didn't feel angry about Mei Qinglian's explanation. Demonic Dao was not the right way, and its development itself was very cruel. If you have the ability and value, I will protect you and protect you. On the contrary, even if you die, no one will care about you. Between Chu Xiu and the hidden demon clan, the meaning of the transaction was much stronger than the inheritance. How much reputation and benefits he could bring to the hidden demon clan, the hidden demon clan would also give Chu Xiu something. Including the matter of paying who this time, it was actually a transaction. If it was done well, Chu Xiu would be rewarded. If it was messed up, then you are useless. This time, Chu Xiu actually succeeded. Qilian village was saved, and Ju Yi Manor was half destroyed. It was just that there were some accidents that caused Chu Xiu to fall into it. Therefore, Mei Qinglian could send 2 martial Dao Grand Masters to save Chu Xiu, which was already extremely benevolent. Chu Xiu never imagined that Mei Qinglian would come to save him regardless of the risk of exposing her identity. This was right with Chu Xiu's own speculation. Even if the hidden demon clan really sent someone to pick him up, he had to support himself in the blank time in the middle. It was better to rely on oneself than others. It was more reliable to kill his way out. Therefore, for Mei Qinglian's explanation, Chu Xiu just nodded and didn't say much. Mei Qinglian might have realized that she had indeed miscalculated this time. It wasn't a problem to send Chu Xiu, but she didn't arrange a way out in advance. If Mei Qinglian had informed Xing Tianyao in advance, perhaps there wouldn't be so much trouble. After all, this matter was Mei Qinglian's own matter, not the entire hidden demon clan's. Now that there was a problem, Mei Qinglian also felt a little embarrassed. Mei Qinglian coughed and said, "Well, this matter is indeed partly my responsibility. I originally wanted to give you something, but now I can't bring it out. I should change it to something else, but this thing is not in my hands. I can only try my best to help you fight for it. Whether you can get it or not depends on the final development." Hearing Mei Qinglian's words, Chu Xiu was interested. He asked, "What is it?" Mei Qinglian knocked on the table with her slender fingers and said, "It's a qualification to enter Xiaofan." Xiaofan? Is it an ancient relic or a secret land? Chu Xiu asked. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "I don't know whether that place is a relic or a secret land. Some people even say that it's a world. However, the existence of Xiaofan is related to the ancient tribulation. That place only appeared after the ancient tribulation. There are countless relics and secret lands in it, as well as countless luck and opportunities. By the way, I remember that you have several great compassion poems of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang. Tell me, how many great compassion poems have you collected?" Chu Xiu pondered for a moment, but still told the truth, 5. Mei Qinglian's eyes revealed a trace of astonishment. "I didn't expect that you would actually be able to quietly gather all 5 great compassion poems. I reckon that in the history of Jianghu, you are the one who has gathered the most great compassion poems. But do you know where the source of the great compassion poems of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang is? It's in this Xiaofan. If you can enter it, maybe you can collect the complete version of the great compassion poems of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang." Chapter 537. This was the first time Chu Xiu had heard of this little mortal world. He had never heard of these 3 words before. However, judging from Mei Qinglian's attitude, it was obvious that this place was extraordinary. Moreover, Mei Qinglian said that this place could allow Chu Xiu to gather the sorrowful poem of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang. This indeed tempted Chu Xiu. Heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang great compassion fu was a powerful demonic art. No one knew how powerful it was because no one had ever collected all of it. However, according to other people's speculations, its lower limit was 9 transformations. After gathering all of it, this cultivation technique might reach the level of a supreme cultivation technique or a peerless cultivation technique. Seeing Chu Xiu's expression, Mei Qinglian smiled and said, "If it's just this, then I don't need to be so cautious." The existence of Xiao Fan Tian wasn't a secret to the top of the pugilistic world. It was just that the conditions to enter were very harsh. However, there were countless opportunities inside. Ever since the ancient calamity, Xiao Fan Tian had appeared. Countless people had entered it, but no one had explored it completely. My holy sect Supreme Dugu had entered before. After coming out, he created a peerless demonic cultivation technique that shocked the heavens and earth. Chunyang Dao sect's immortal Ning Xuanji had also entered and comprehended the Tianji celestial technique. His cultivation was extremely high. This was far away. There was moon-worshipping sect Si Shaonan. After entering Xiao Fan Tian, he finally completed the Mend Heaven Heart Sutra that he had painstakingly cultivated for decades. There was also World Alliance's Chenqing Di who had honed his unparalleled fist intent to the peak in Xiao Fan Tian. In short, this was a very mystical place. After entering it, one wouldn't have a 100% chance to soar into the sky, but it could provide a stepping stone for one to soar into the sky. Whether one could take advantage of this opportunity to soar into the sky would depend on one's own strength and luck. Xiao Fan Tian opened once every 30 years. The location of the opening was different every time. Other than the first 6 hours, one could enter at will. At other times, one needed a specific key to enter. So, if you want to enter Xiao Fan Tian, you can only rely on the illusory luck and the key. These keys are controlled by the top sects and some experts in the pugilistic world. There are very few scattered in the pugilistic world. Chu Xiu asked, "Saintess has the key?" Mei Qinglian rolled her eyes and said, "If I had the key, do you think I would give it to you? With the power of my Yin demon sect in the past, I naturally have keys, and not just one. However, my Yin demon sect has experienced great changes in the past, and I'm the only one left. The keys have long since been taken away. I said that I could help you get the key to Xiao Fan Tian. I was referring to the key of Guanzhong torture room. Don't think that Guanzhong torture room's current strength is remarkable, but the favors and connections left behind by Chu Kuanga are beyond your imagination. Now, Guan Siyu has 3 keys in her hands, all left behind by Chu Kuanga. Under normal circumstances, only 3 people from the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall will enter the minor mortal heaven this time. They are Guan Siyu, the second in command of the Punishment Division, Feng Sha, and the great commander that you haven't seen before, 5 Law Sword and Lionian. At the mention of An Lionian's name, killing intent flashed in Mei Qinglian's eyes. Previously, Mei Qinglian had said that if it weren't for the few leaders of the Punishment Division, she could have controlled Guanzhong torture room long ago. Feng Sha and An Lionian were the biggest obstacles in front of Mei Qinglian. Mei Qinglian said, "With my current identity, I can't fight for the key to Xiao Fan Tian. I can't enter, but you can. It's not long before Xiao Fan Tian opens. Recuperate during this period of time. I'll try my best to talk to Guan Siyu and get him to give you a key. You've just entered unity of heaven and man, so it's unrealistic that you can become a martial Dao Grandmaster just by entering Xiao Fan Tian. However, I can guarantee that if you can obtain some similar opportunities, you'll at least be able to build a good foundation for you to become a martial Dao Grandmaster." Chu Xiu nodded when he heard that. If Xiao Fan Tian was really that miraculous, then his injuries this time were worth it. Since that's the case, I'll go back to recuperate and wait for the saintess' good news. With that, Chu Xiu left. His priority now was to recuperate from the injuries on his primordial spirit. Otherwise, even if he obtained the opportunity to enter Shao Fan Tian this time, he wouldn't be able to unleash his greatest strength. Only a few of Chu Xiu's confidants knew that he had gone to northern Yen. Everyone else in Guanxi thought that Chu Xiu was still in closed-door cultivation. When Chu Xiu returned to Guanxi, the first person he went to find was none other than Lu Fengxian. Previously, Lu Fengxian was also in closed-door cultivation to cultivate the Nine Heavens Fiend Golden Body and the Demon God Unparalleled Halberd, but he had already come out of closed-door cultivation and noticed that Chu Xiu wasn't around. However, Lu Fengxian wasn't a talkative person. Even though he noticed that Chu Xiu wasn't around, he didn't say much. At this time, seeing Chu Xiu's appearance, Lu Fengxian immediately noticed that Chu Xiu was abnormal. "Brother Chu, are you injured?" Chu Xiu nodded. Xian Jiuyo, who was with Lu Fengxian, interrupted, "Hehe, Chu Xiu, you're really unlucky this time. The foundation of your primordial spirit was injured. This kind of injury isn't easy to heal no matter where it is." As one of the 4 generals under Marquis Lu Wenho in the past, Xian Jiuyo was good at primordial spirit's secret methods. At this time, he immediately saw through Chu Xiu's background. These 4 people had recovered some of their cultivation during this period of time, and they even reached the 3-flower realm. However, Xian Jiuyo and the others' attitude toward Chu Xiu was far inferior to that of Lu Fengxian. From the way the 4 of them saw it, Lu Fengxian had obtained Marquis Lu's inheritance, which meant that she was the second successor of Marquis Lu. She was their master. What was Chu Xiu? Even though he had a good relationship with Lu Fengxian and was best friends, Xian Jiuyo and the others still treated Chu Xiu with arrogance. They were also a little dissatisfied that Lu Fengxian had given the Nine Heavens Fiend Golden Body to Chu Xiu. Lu Fengxian frowned slightly. This seemed to be the most serious injury Chu Xiu had ever suffered since he met Chu Xiu. It even hurt his foundation. "Brother Chu, what are you going to do?" "It just so happens that Divine Dr. Feng is in Guanxi now. I'll take you to see him." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's what I was thinking." Lin Ye's mental strength was severely injured, and now Chu Xiu, who had been in seclusion, was also severely injured. This kind of thing was too much of a coincidence, and it was easy for people to think of something. Chu Xiu did not trust Feng Buping, but he trusted Lu Fengxian. With Lu Fengxian's important relationship, Feng Buping had no reason to reveal this matter. Moreover, this was the land of Guanxi, Chu Xiu's territory. Even if Feng Buping had any other intentions, he could not cause any trouble. In the medical center of Guanxi's Jianghu prefecture, Feng Buping's hand seeped into Chu Xiu's body to check on Chu Xiu's injuries. Feng Buping had been in Guanxi for a while. Compared to when he was in the Valley of the Dead, it was actually more convenient for him to be in Guanxi. In this small area of Guanzhong, the Guanzhong torture hall was a great deterrent. Chu Xiu helped Feng Buping open such a medical center in Jianghu prefecture, and there were also the Jianghu constables of the Guanzhong torture room to maintain order here. It was much more convenient than when Feng Buping was in the Valley of the Dead. Therefore, when Lu Fengxian brought Chu Xiu for treatment, Feng Buping immediately pushed away the martial artists who were queuing outside and gave priority to treating Chu Xiu. Of course, Lu Fengxian played a part in this, but the main reason was that Feng Buping was now in Chu Xiu's territory. Feng Buping had a strange temper, but he was not an idiot. Of course, he knew who was protecting him now. Sensing the foundation of Chu Xiu's spirit was damaged, Feng Buping's expression changed slightly. Previously in the northern Yan, Lin Ye's matter caused an uproar. Everyone in the Jianghu knew about this. And Chu Xiu was punished to face the wall. Everyone in the Guanzhong torture room knew about this. Feng Buping had never heard that facing the wall could cause damage to one's spirit or even cause damage to one's foundation. There was clearly something wrong with this. However, Feng Buping didn't say anything, he just pretended not to notice. He didn't care who Chu Xiu was or what secrets he had. He only knew that Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian were good friends, and he was still living in Chu Xiu's territory. That was enough. Sometimes, it was better to be muddle-headed. Don't say what you shouldn't say, don't see what you shouldn't see. When Feng Buping stopped, Lu Fengxian quickly asked, Divine Dr. Feng, how is Brother Chu? Feng Buping took a deep breath and said, Official Chu's situation isn't very optimistic. It has already damaged the foundation of his spirit. Although I can heal this kind of injury, with my current ability, it will leave a hidden danger, which will affect the growth of his spirit in the future. Lu Fengxian frowned. She knew that Chu Xiu was good at spirit mystic arts, but now Chu Xiu's spirit was injured, which was equivalent to cutting off Chu Xiu's future cultivation path of spirit mystic arts. However, Chu Xiu didn't mind. This group of medical practitioners were all the same. They never said anything that was certain. So Chu Xiu just asked indifferently, is there a way to make up for this kind of hidden danger? Feng Buping nodded and said, there is, but the conditions are a bit harsh. The simplest is official Chu. You can step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm within 2 years. At that time, your injury hasn't stabilized. You can use the world's essence Qi to cleanse your foundation when advancing to the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. The second is official Chu. You can find some secret arts that specialize in repairing spirit, but this kind of secret art is the rarest, even rarer than offensive and defensive secret arts. The third is that Lord Chu is able to find 9 revolution spirit herbs that are specifically targeted at the primordial spirit. Consuming and refining them will also be effective. LV Fengxian's brows furrowed even deeper after hearing Feng Buping's explanation. Because every single one of those 3 conditions was extremely harsh. Chapter 538. In Lu Fengxian's opinion, the 3 points that Feng Buping proposed were somewhat unreliable. It was difficult to find a secret method that could repair the spirit, and it was even more difficult to find a 9 revolution level spirit medicine. As for becoming a martial Dao Grand Master in 2 years, probably no one in the entire Jianghu would dare to boast about it. Being a martial Dao Grand Master was different from other realms. It needed to be comprehended. Once you had an epiphany, you could merge with heaven and earth, condense the true core, and enter the Grand Master realm. But if you couldn't comprehend it, it was very likely that you would be stuck in the unity of heaven and man realm for the rest of your life. There were many martial artists in the Jianghu who had reached the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm a long time ago. They were only half a step away from becoming a martial Dao Grand Master, but in the end, they couldn't take that half step for their entire lives. Although Lu Fengxian was confident in Chu Xiu and believed that Chu Xiu would definitely become a martial Dao Grand Master in the future, 2 years was a little too fast. However, Chu Xiu seemed very indifferent at this time. He directly waved his hand and said, Divine Dr. Feng, treat according to what you said. As for the hidden danger, we'll talk about it later. Not to mention whether he could become a martial Dao Grand Master in 2 years, he might encounter some opportunities in Xiaofan heaven this time. Instead of worrying about how to eliminate the hidden danger in his spirit, it was better to look forward first. Feng Buping nodded, took out things such as the formation plate and golden needles, and began to repair Chu Xiu's spirit. The biggest difference between the divine doctor of the Jianghu and ordinary doctors was that they could use more means, and they could even use all kinds of tricks that you couldn't think of to treat your injuries. Feng Buping's reputation was not just for show. If Chu Xiu relied on himself to heal his injuries, it was estimated that he wouldn't be able to recover to the peak in a year and a half. However, with Feng Buping, Chu Xiu only used less than 10 days to restore his spirit to the peak state, but the hidden danger was still there. Now, if Chu Xiu didn't eliminate the hidden danger, his attainments in spirit could only stay at this level forever. After more than 20 days, Chu Xiu was still cultivating in seclusion, and Yuqi personally came to inform him to go to the main hall for a discussion. This time, even Yuqi found it very strange, because his master didn't say why he was looking for Chu Xiu. From Yuqi's point of view, Chu Xiu had been in seclusion all this time and did not seem to have caused any trouble. Could it be that the meeting this time was about something big related to the Guanzhong torture room? Why did he have to hide it from him? Chu Xiu had more or less guessed that Mei Qinglian had successfully convinced Guan Xiu. Otherwise, the Guanzhong torture room would only have 3 places to enter Xianxia, and all 3 Wu Dao Grand Masters would have gone. Why would they need to ask Chu Xiu for help? After stepping into the torture chamber's headquarters, Xiao Yi and the other 3 disciplinary officers were all there. Apart from Yin Baodong, Xiao Yi and Chu Simo took the initiative to greet Chu Xiu. In fact, Xiao Yi and the others were a little puzzled. They did not know why Guan Siyu had asked them to come. The few of them were in the Guanzhong torture room's upper echelons, and they knew some things about Xianxia. However, they had never imagined that they would be able to enter it. It was true that the Guanzhong torture room had extra keys, but they were reserved for the 3 martial Dao Grand Masters. Some large sects with deep heritage could give the keys to some of the younger generation martial art practitioners, allowing them to enter and search for their own opportunities. However, it was clear that their Guanzhong disciplinary hall was not so extravagant as to do so. After a while, the 3 leaders of the punishment division walked into the hall together. This time, the 3rd leader, Si Ming, did not follow behind Guan Siyu. Instead, he entered with the other 2 leaders. This was Chu Xiu's first time meeting the big leader of the punishment division, Lionian. Lionian was a tall and skinny middle-aged man. His skin was pale and sickly, and his eyes were sunken, giving him a sinister look. His entire body was shrouded in a black robe, and he carried 5 swords on his back. However, they were wrapped in ordinary scabbards, making it impossible to tell what they were. Lionian kept a very low profile, to the point that very few people in the outside world had heard of his name. Even the people in the Guanzhong torture room did not know who he was. In fact, the people in charge of most of the affairs in the punishment division were the 2nd leader, Fang Sha, and the 3rd leader, Si Ming. As the big leader, he was often elusive, and no one knew what he was up to. Chu Xiu did not know much about Lionian previously, but he had obtained information about him from Mei Qinglian. It was no wonder that Guan Siyu was unable to make the punishment division completely obey his orders, given her current strength. Lionian's seniority was just too high. In theory, he was even 1 generation older than Guan Siyu. Back when Chu Kuanga had still been around, Lionian had been colleagues with Chu Kuanga. The 2 of them had fought for the position of the Guanzhong torture room's hall master. However, Chu Kuanga's advantage had been too obvious back then. As long as one was not blind, everyone would know who the hall master position should have been. Therefore, even if Lionian had wanted to fight for it, he could not have won. In the end, he had taken the initiative to give up the position. Later on, Chu Kuanga had died unexpectedly. Logically speaking, the position should have been Lionian's turn. However, Chu Kuanga felt that Lionian's character was a little extreme and gloomy, and he would easily go to extremes. It was fine for him to be in charge of the punishment division, but it would not be appropriate for him to be in charge of the entire Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, he had given the position to Guan Siyu. Lionian had been a little unconvinced and uncooperative with Guan Siyu in the early days. After all, Guan Siyu had been a junior to him back then, and she had stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm later than him. What right did she have to make him bow down to her? However, Guan Siyu had displayed her strength later on and even led the Guanzhong torture room to its current status. Guan Siyu's prestige in the Guanzhong torture room grew, so Lionian had no choice but to be unconvinced. However, although Lionian had given up on fighting with Guan Siyu for the position of hall master, the punishment division was still his territory. As long as Lionian was around, the punishment division had to be in his hands. He could ignore it, but Guan Siyu could not do anything to the punishment division without his permission. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes as he looked at Lionian. He thought to himself that Guan Siyu was still more concerned about the overall situation. She was afraid that she would cause damage to the Guanzhong torture room, so she did not choose to fight Lionian to the end. However, this was only because of Guan Siyu. If it were him, Chu Xiu would not be able to tolerate having such a powerhouse under him who did not listen to his orders. In order to fend off foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. If one could not even clench one's fist tightly, what could one use to fight against outsiders? After almost everyone had arrived, Guan Siyu walked in with Mei Qinglian a while later. Logically speaking, this was an internal meeting of the Guanzhong torture room. Although Mei Qinglian was Guan Siyu's wife, she was ultimately an outsider. It was inappropriate for her to appear on such an occasion. However, Xiao Yi and the others acted as if they did not see it and did not say anything. This was not the first time Guan Siyu had done something like this, and they were already used to it. If they spoke now, they would only offend Guan Siyu. They would not be so foolish as to speak out of turn. However, and Liuanian said in a slightly hoarse voice, Guan Siyu, why did you bring a woman here for a meeting of the torture division? You have been a hall master for a few years and are used to being flattered by others. Have you become so arrogant that you have even forgotten your own surname? Everyone present immediately felt a chill in their hearts. The air seemed to be filled with the strong smell of gunpowder. Guan Siyu and Liuanian had rarely met over the years, because whenever they did, such a situation would inevitably occur. Guan Siyu was very tolerant and considered the overall situation, but Liuanian was extremely indignant that Guan Siyu had become a hall master. Therefore, he had never addressed Guan Siyu as hall master all these years. Guan Siyu pulled Mei Qinglian to sit down and said coldly, so what if it is a meeting of the torture division? The rules of the torture division do not stipulate that women are not allowed to participate. If the rules really don't allow it, then I will change the rules. Now, I am the hall master. Chu Xiu glanced at Guan Siyu in surprise. Hall master Guan is rarely so domineering. Is it because his woman is next to him this time, so he is unyielding for once? Of course, Guan Siyu also had the qualifications to be unyielding. Not to mention anything else, at least in the battle between Guan Siyu and Xiahou Zhen, Guan Siyu's magical power 9 changes directly crushed Xiahou Zhen. From this point, it could be seen that Guan Siyu's cultivation was definitely not that simple. Although he had not reached the true fire spirit refinement state, he was definitely considered an outstanding talent in the martial Dao real pellet state. And Liuanian snorted coldly, why did you call everyone here? Guan Siyu said solemnly, of course, it is to discuss who can enter Xiaofan heaven. And Liuanian frowned when he heard this, what is there to discuss about this kind of thing? My Guanzhong torture room has a total of 3 keys left over from generation to generation. It just so happens that all 3 of us can enter. Guan Siyu said, I know there are only 3 keys, but I am not going to let all 3 of us enter. I need to leave one person to guard the Guanzhong torture room. Xiaofan heaven only opens once every 30 years. The last time we opened our Guanzhong torture room, there was only 1 key. It was Sir Chu Kuanga who entered it when he was young. The Guanzhong torture room is guarded by the old hall master. Although our Guanzhong torture hall is not in the chaotic situation of being besieged on all sides, for the sake of insurance, it is safer to leave someone to guard the place. Upon hearing this, Liuanian and Fang Sha's expressions changed slightly. Guan Siyu was the hall master, so he definitely had to go, so between Liuanian and Fang Sha, one of them couldn't go. But Xiaofan heaven only opened once every 30 years, and this could be said to be their only chance. In the last 30 years, Fang Sha was still a martial artist of the younger generation, so he was not qualified to enter. And Liuanian was not a martial Dao Grand Master at that time, and he was not as good as Chu Kuanga, so he was not qualified either. If they did not enter the minor mortal sky this time, then in the next 30 years, Liuanian and Fang Sha would no longer be in their prime. Even if they entered and obtained any fortuitous encounters or treasures, the effects would be greatly reduced. Chapter 539. As soon as Guan Siyu finished speaking, the atmosphere in the entire discussion hall became strange. And Liuanian said coldly, Guan Siyu, who are you going to let stay and who are you going to let go? Guan Siyu said solemnly, let Fang Sha stay. He is the second leader of the punishment division. He has been cooperating with everyone for a long time. His status and strength are enough. He is just right to stay in the punishment hall. Chu Xiu was one of the people who were going. This time, when the small mortal heaven opened, the various sects would definitely focus on bringing their younger generation disciples. Chu Xiu is now ranked 4th on the Longhu list. If Little Celestial Master Zhang Qingjun, Wisdom King, Zhong Xian, Chief Sword Fang Qi Shao and others all go, but Chu Xiu doesn't go, what will the people of the underworld think of our Guanzhong torture room? Doesn't this mean that our Guanzhong torture room doesn't value the young disciples? Upon hearing this, Fang Sha's face turned black. Only focusing on the younger generation disciples, but I, the old man of Guanzhong torture room, don't need to be valued? Fang Sha immediately snorted coldly, Hall Master, I'm not convinced. He wasn't in Liuyan who could call Guan Xiyu's name directly. Fang Sha had only been a martial arts grand master for a few years, so his strength was naturally not as good as Guan Xiyu, so he didn't dare to be so presumptuous. Fang Sha said angrily, Xiaofan heaven opens once every 30 years. Because Chu Xiu is still young, he still has time. But if I miss this time, when I'm no longer in my prime, even if I get the opportunity, what's the use? It's true that the real pellet state has a lifespan of 300 years, but how many people can really live to 300 years old? I just stepped into the real pellet state when I'm over 60 years old. I'm already not young. How long can I last in my prime? How many 30 years can I wait in this life? Fang Sha's words were very aggrieved, but in fact, he was telling the truth. In theory, a martial arts grand master of the real pellet state could indeed live for 300 years, but that was only in theory. Could you guarantee that you wouldn't fight with others for a lifetime and leave no internal injuries? Therefore, there were very few martial Dao masters who could live to 300 years old. Although Fang Sha wasn't too old when he stepped into the real pellet state, he wasn't young either. Therefore, the peak of his prime was from now until he was about 100 years old. After 100 years, his vitality would no longer grow. At that time, even if he really got any treasure, it would be of limited use to him. Chu Xiu chuckled and said, Chief Fang, it's not that I, Chu Xiu, want to fight for anything, but your words are interesting. You can't wait, but can I? Right now, I'm representing the Guanzhong torture room to compete with Zhang Qingjun, Zhong Xian, and the other elites of the younger generation. If I don't go this time, I'll be one step behind them. In the future, I might be one step behind them. It's not that I, Chu Xiu, want to speak harshly, but with my current status among the younger generation in the world of martial arts, if I were to run to another top-notch faction in the world of martial arts, they would rather give up the opportunity to their own sons to let me join them. Fang Sha sneered, Young man, you're really arrogant. Go if you have the ability. Hand over all the things that the Guanzhong torture room gave you. I want to see if they will believe you. No matter how talented he is, no one will take in a slave with no bottom line and no one will take him in. Fang Sha was also an experienced man, so he naturally wouldn't be rebuked by Chu Xiu's words. Chu Xiu's talent was indeed rare in the underworld. The Guanzhong torture room got Chu Xiu and became famous. But at the same time, if Chu Xiu left the Guanzhong torture room now, not many sects would dare to take Chu Xiu in. Chu Xiu first joined the Blue Dragon Society, then betrayed the Blue Dragon Society for no reason, then joined the Guanzhong torture room. Now, if Chu Xiu betrayed the Guanzhong torture room and joined other forces, wouldn't he be a slave to 3 different families? Even if he did it once or twice, he wouldn't be able to do it a 3rd time. At that time, there would probably be a lot of people who would doubt Chu Xiu's loyalty. Those powers would also be worried that if they took in and nurtured Chu Xiu would betray them in the future. If that happened, wouldn't it be like drawing water with a sieve? Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and looked at Fang Sha, saying coldly, Who are you calling a slave to 3 different families? Not long ago, because of Yin Butong's matter, Chu Xiu had a fight with Fang Sha. The other party also used the sky-extinguishing earth-annihilating fist. At that time, Chu Xiu was still slightly inferior to Fang Sha in terms of strength. However, after being hunted down by Nie Renlong, Chu Xiu's cultivation base did not make much of a breakthrough. However, he could sense that his strength had risen by a notch. Moreover, he faced several martial Dao grandmasters head-on several times in a row, and one of his opponents was Nie Renlong, who was ranked on the Fengyun list. When facing these martial Dao grandmasters who had condensed the real pellet state again, Chu Xiu's state of mind also changed a little. These martial Dao grandmasters did not seem to be unattainable. Seeing that the tension between the two sides was getting stronger, Mei Qinglian suddenly said, "This is an internal matter of the Guanzhong torture room, and it's not appropriate for a woman like me to butt in. However, from the perspective of an outsider, I still have something to say." However, and Lionian said coldly, "Since it's not appropriate for you to butt in, don't butt in. Since you know you're an outsider, why are you still talking nonsense?" Guan Siyu looked at An Lionian and said coldly, "Madam, speak. Everyone is listening." An Lionian looked at Guan Siyu and shouted in a low voice, "Guan Siyu. Are you crazy? Do you know what you're doing now? You're actually letting a woman express her opinion on such an important matter?" And Lionian was really a little angry at that moment. In fact, Fang Sha wasn't his man, nor was he Guan Siyu's man. It was just that neither of them wanted to submit to Guan Siyu completely. Therefore, Fang Sha couldn't go now, and Guan Siyu wasn't targeting him, so An Lionian could keep his mouth shut. However, An Lionian realized that Guan Siyu had really changed. All these years, An Lionian had never truly submitted to Guan Siyu. However, he was convinced of Guan Siyu's abilities. When she had first taken over the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Siyu had been really impartial. For the sake of the torture hall's laws, she had even crippled her personal disciple. This also made many warriors of the Guanzhong torture room see Guan Siyu's attitude. The entire Guanzhong torture room's atmosphere instantly became upright, and no one dared to violate the laws again. After all, Guan Siyu had dared to be so ruthless to her personal disciple. What else could they be lacking? Furthermore, Guan Siyu had colluded with the other three nations to acknowledge the Guanzhong torture room's status and led the torture hall to its current unprecedented status. Although An Lionian hadn't submitted to Guan Siyu, he was truly convinced. At the very least, if he had been the hall master, An Lionian knew that he wouldn't have been able to achieve Guan Siyu's level of talent. Therefore, An Lionian had always been very low-key all these years. Even the punishment division was only in charge. Although he hadn't submitted, he hadn't caused trouble for Guan Siyu. He had even watched as Guan Siyu had placed his trusted aide, Si Ming, into the punishment division as the third leader. This was An Lionian's attitude. After all, he was also a member of the Guanzhong torture room and had been nurtured by the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, he was happy to see the Guanzhong torture room grow stronger one day. However, at some point in time, Guan Siyu had started to change. Not only was she no longer so enthusiastic about expanding the Guanzhong torture room, but she had also started to be anxious to maintain her position. Furthermore, she had planted her own forces in various areas. The iron-faced judge of the past had now developed his own selfish motives. As for when all of this had started, it had only started after that woman of unknown origins had appeared by Guan Siyu's side. Mei Qinglian's gaze was aggrieved. She put on a pitiful expression and said, "I just couldn't bear to see the Guanzhong torture room descend into internal strife over such a small matter. Therefore, I just wanted to say a few words of justice. Since the great leader isn't willing, then I won't say any more. Don't affect our harmony." For some reason, An Lionian was infuriated when he saw Mei Qinglian like this. Anger surged in his heart, and he slammed the table and pointed at Mei Qinglian as he roared, "Demoness, how dare you sow discord here? Do you have the right to speak here?" Chu Xiu raised his brows. There was clearly something wrong with An Lionian's current state. From the looks of it, An Lionian was an introverted, calm, and gloomy person. However, he was unable to control his emotions in front of so many people. Clearly, something was not right. Chu Xiu did not believe that Mei Qinglian was not behind this. However, what was even stranger was that none of the three martial Dao masters present noticed what Mei Qinglian had done. Neither did Chu Xiu. Now that his mental strength had recovered, he could use the heaven's sun gazing at air to take a look. However, if he used the heaven's sun gazing at air in such a situation, not only would Chu Xiu be tricking Mei Qinglian, but he would also be tricking himself. When Guan Siyu saw this scene, the aura around him condensed to the extreme. It was as if he had transformed into a black hole, absorbing endless heaven and earth yuan qi into it. It was boundless and as terrifying as an abyss. Everyone present was incomparably shocked. They had all seen Guan Siyu fight before. Even when Xiahozhen came to fight over Chu Xiu previously, Guan Siyu had not revealed such a terrifying aura. And Liuyan also revealed a look of shock. It had been a long time since he had seen Guan Siyu fight. And Liuyan did not even watch the battle between Guan Siyu and Xiahozhen previously. It was only when he sensed Guan Siyu's aura again that Liuyan realized how powerful Guan Siyu was. In terms of time spent breaking through to the martial Dao Master Realm, Liuyan was more than 10 years earlier than Guan Siyu. However, Guan Siyu's current strength had probably left him in the dust. Most people in the pugilistic world believed that Guan Siyu's strength was not worthy of his ranking on the Wind Cloud list. They felt that he was not qualified to be ranked in the top 10 on the Wind Cloud list and compete with those true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouses. It was not only the people in the pugilistic world who thought so. People like Liuyan and the others in the Guanzhong torture room thought so too. They felt that Guan Siyu's ranking was entirely due to Chu Kuanga's influence. In the end, Liuyan finally realized that putting aside whether Guan Siyu was worthy of his ranking or not, at least Guan Siyu was not as weak as he imagined. Chapter 540. Guan Siyu's aura had already condensed to a terrifying level. It was as if the entire punishment hall headquarters would be destroyed if this aura was released. And Liuyan glared at Guan Siyu. As he resisted Guan Siyu's aura with great difficulty, he gritted his teeth and said, 9 transformations of the divine power, heaven-devouring. This technique originated from the remnant of the heaven-devouring demon codex that I obtained when I killed heaven-devouring demon codex. Now, you are using it to deal with me. Guan Siyu's expression didn't change as she said, the remnant of the heaven-devouring demon codex is still in the arsenal. Now, I only have the 9 transformations of the divine power that belongs to me. And Liuyan, I can tolerate whatever you've done all these years because you're a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room. You're a comrade who fought alongside Lord Chu Kuanga, and you've made great contributions to the Guanzhong torture room. But don't forget that I'm the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room now. I've already said this once. This is the second time, and I don't wish to say it a third time today. After saying that, Guan Siyu withdrew her aura, allowing everyone present to heave a sigh of relief. At that moment, Guan Siyu said indifferently, Madam, just say whatever you want to say. No one will interrupt you now. Mei Qinglian stood up and said, Then I'll say it. There are only 3 keys. Disregarding status and other things, just based on contributions, Official Chu is also qualified to go. Chief Fang, forgive me for being blunt, but over the past few years, has Chief Fang led the punishment hall to any great contributions? The answer is none. The third leader, Si Ming, will handle the small matters, while the big matters will either be handled by Lord and Liuyan or the old master. The one who has the most free time is you, Lord Fang Sha. On the other hand, ever since Chu Xiu joined the Guanzhong torture room, he has made great contributions to the Guanzhong torture room time and time again. He has earned fame and benefits. Lord Fang, I'm afraid that your contributions aren't as great as Chu Xiu's, right? Fang Sha wanted to retort, but everyone could see that his contributions during this period of time were indeed inferior to Chu Xiu's. However, the problem was that Fang Sha was already the second in command of the punishment hall. He was a martial arts grandmaster, and he was already at the top. Above him was Liuyan, who was more powerful and experienced than him. Below him was Guan Siyu's trusted aide, Si Ming. Therefore, if there were any problems, there would be others to take care of things that were too difficult or too easy. Fang Sha naturally wooed and not rush. Mei Qinglian continued, and let's not talk about the contribution first. The 3 keys to enter Little Fan Tian all have their origins. One of them was passed down from generation to generation in the Guanzhong punishment hall, but the other two were found by the previous hall master, Lord Chu Kuanga. Xiao as Mei, Chu, Mei long as hall, Chu as I hall master if I hall as Zhou hall master could. Therefore, strictly speaking, shouldn't we ask Chu Kuanga's only son, Chu Yuanxing, about how these two keys should be distributed? Fang Sha's face darkened when he heard that. If that was the case, he could just give the keys to Chu Xiu. Was there even a need for discussion? Therefore, if the keys were given to Chu Yuanxing to distribute, Chu Xiu would definitely get one. The most disgusting thing was that Fang Sha couldn't refute that, because Chu Yuanxing had a very special status in the Guanzhong torture room. Although he didn't have any real power, Fang Sha had to treat Chu Yuanxing politely just because he was Chu Kuanga's only son. Even An Liunian wouldn't show him any displeasure. Seeing that Mei Qinglian had rendered Fang Sha speechless, Guan Siyu said solemnly, "It's decided then. An Liunian, Chu Xiu, and I will head to Xiaofan heaven this time." Fang Sha, don't feel wronged. Weren't you worried that you wouldn't be in your prime the next time Xiaofan heaven opens? There's a drop of 10,000-year hollow azurite juice in the armory. If you consume it, it can increase your lifespan by 10 to 20 years. When you were cultivating the heaven-extinguishing earth-extinguishing oblivion-killing fist in your early years, you suffered a backlash once, causing your internal organs to suffer internal injuries. This drop of 10,000-year hollow azurite juice can also heal your internal injuries. Hearing Guan Siyu's words, Fang Sha's eyes still revealed a hint of unwillingness. He did want the drop of 10,000-year hollow azurite juice in the armory, but he could exchange for it after accumulating some more merit points. However, there were countless opportunities in Xiaofan heaven. What if he could obtain something more precious than the 10,000-year hollow azurite juice? Fang Sha stood up and said coldly, "Hall Master, I'm still unconvinced. I've made countless contributions to the Guanzhong torture room all these years. If it were anything else, I could give it to a junior like him, but I can't give up the right to enter Xiaofan heaven. If I, a martial Dao master, am not qualified to enter, what right does a junior like Chu Xiu have? Or could it be that I, Fang Sha, have fought for the Guanzhong torture room my entire life, but I can't compare to the contributions of a junior like him?" Guan Siyu frowned. She did not seem to have expected Fang Sha to be so persistent. Even after she showed her attitude, Fang Sha still insisted on going. Just as Guan Siyu was about to say something, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "Chief Fang, you keep mentioning martial Dao masters. Do you mean that anyone who is a martial Dao master is qualified to enter?" Alright, let's not talk about status, influence, and contributions today. We'll just talk about strength. If I win, this opportunity will be mine. Do you dare to accept the challenge? Xiao Yi and the rest were shocked. Chu Xiu actually dared to challenge a martial Dao master? Although they knew that Chu Xiu had killed a martial Dao master before, that person was only a rogue cultivator and had limited strength. He could not be compared to Fang Sha, who was the second in command of the arrest division. Mei Qinglian also looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. Since when did this guy become so arrogant? In reality, Chu Xiu did not need to say anything. Since Mei Qinglian had persuaded Guan Siyu to replace Fang Sha with Chu Xiu, the key would belong to Chu Xiu no matter what. Now that Chu Xiu had taken the initiative to say something, it would be self-defeating if he lost. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes at Fang Sha. Mei Qinglian was right. He had really become arrogant, and he wanted to vent his anger from being hunted by the righteous manner. After fighting with Nie Renlong, Chu Xiu realized that the so-called martial Dao master was not an unreachable existence. When Chu Xiu was very far from the martial Dao master realm, he would naturally feel a sense of reverence because of his strength. This was not fear, but instinct. It was an instinctive reverence for strength. An ant like nobody who kept shouting that man could conquer nature and that he wanted to defy nature was just a joke. Only when one had strength that was close to the heavens would one be qualified to defy nature. Now that Chu Xiu had killed a martial Dao master and fought with a martial Dao master like Nie Renlong who was on the martial Dao leaderboard, he indeed had the right to be arrogant. He also had the right to be on equal footing with a martial Dao master. didn't Fang Sha say that he was a junior? Chu Xiu would also tell Fang Sha that the so-called seniors and juniors did not look at age or seniority, but strength. Fang Sha was stunned when he heard that. Then, he laughed and said, "That's what you said. Hall Master, you saw it too. It was Chu Xiu who took the initiative to fight me. I'm not bullying him." Guan Xiu frowned and looked at Chu Xiu. "Are you really ready?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Of course, in case someone is always unconvinced." Guan Xiu waved her hand and said, "Since that's the case, you guys can fight. However, remember not to get injured." Fang Sha chuckled and said, "Don't worry, Hall Master. I'll be careful." Chu Xiu also said calmly, "I know what I'm doing too." Fang Sha was a martial Dao master, and Chu Xiu also had the strength to kill a martial Dao master. The battle between the two of them was extremely destructive, so the few of them moved to the innermost training ground of the headquarters. This place was usually used by martial Dao masters like Guan Xiu to cultivate. It was filled with fortified defensive formations. Even if a martial Dao master attacked, they would not be able to break it completely. Fang Sha stared at Chu Xiu. He did not know where this kid got the courage to challenge him. During the conflict with Yin Batong previously, he had stood up for Yin Batong and exchanged a blow with Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu blocked his punch, which surprised Fang Sha, Chu Xiu was still far from him in terms of strength at that time. Although Fang Sha admitted that he was far inferior to Chu Xiu in the same realm, the two of them were now a major realm apart. Furthermore, they were in the martial Dao master realm, which was like the difference between clouds and mud. He had only been in closed-door cultivation for a few months. Could it be that Chu Xiu had made a breakthrough in closed-door cultivation? In any case, Fang Sha did not believe it. However, although that was what Fang Sha thought, he took the initiative to attack after he stood still. He threw a punch, and boundless killing intent condensed into a substance. The scarlet killing intent condensed into a fiend celestial phantom behind Fang Sha. Sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist was unleashed with all his might. Fang Sha was the leader of the enforcement division who had experienced hundreds of battles. His strength was obtained through killing, not through closed-door cultivation. Although he looked down on Chu Xiu, he did not show any mercy and attacked with all his might. Fang Sha had seen things like failing miserably in an easy task countless times, and he would not make such a mistake again. Looking at Fang Sha's punch, the corner of Chu Xiu's lips curled into a smile, and he also threw a punch. In an instant, his killing intent condensed and he entered the oblivion killing realm. He was also using the sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist. Everyone present raised their eyebrows at the same time. Was Chu Xiu provoking them? Everyone knew that Chu Xiu was proficient in the sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist. However, the sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist was only one of Chu Xiu's many cultivation methods, and it was not his famous skill. Fang Sha's sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist was the martial art that he was truly famous for. Chu Xiu had so many cultivation methods, but he did not use them. Instead, he chose to use the sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist. This could easily be seen as a provocation. However, the moment Chu Xiu threw his punch, everyone realized that Chu Xiu's punch was somewhat different from Fang Sha's. Chapter 541. In terms of martial arts, Chu Xiu's weapon had always been the saber. However, Chu Xiu had learned a variety of close combat killing techniques, and he welcomed all of them with his fists, palms, and fingers. Similarly, among these close combat killing techniques, Chu Xiu had not been able to truly comprehend the essence of any of them. However, when he was being pursued previously, Chu Xiu's mental energy had been crippled, and he had not been able to use the conspicuous demonic blade. Most of the time, he had been using close combat killing techniques to fight against his enemies. His fist intent had also improved during that battle, and he had comprehended something different. Right now, although Chu Xiu and Fang Sha were both using the Annihilation of Heavens and Annihilation Oblivion killing fist, there was a hint of something different about Chu Xiu's killing fist. Golden Buddhist light stuck close to Chu Xiu's arm, and seething demonic qis combined with killing intent and fiendish aura, releasing a series of terrifying demonic howls. At the same time, with the great Vajra divine powers and the 9 heavens demonic golden body, 2 body tempering techniques from both the Buddhist and demon lineages, Chu Xiu could be said to be completely unafraid of clashing head-on with martial arts grandmasters like Fang Sha. However, this was not the most special thing. What truly made Chu Xiu's punch different from Fang Sha's oblivion-killing fist was the fist intent. It was a powerful fist intent that was invincible and looked down on everything. As the punch landed, a powerful fist intent surged out. Buddhist light, demonic qi, blood, and qi merged into one and suddenly erupted. With the 2 fists facing each other, with Chu Xiu and Fang Sha in the center, the ground under their feet started to crack inch by inch despite being protected by a formation. The prowess caused the countenances of Xiao Yi and the others to change drastically. Although Chu Xiu was still at the One with Heaven realm, it was true that he was no longer in existence on the same level as them. A hint of surprise flashed in Guan Xiyu's eyes as she slowly uttered 3 words, Qin Qing Di. Sitting next to Guan Xiyu, Mei Qinglian did not make a sound. She had also recognized that Chu Xiu's punch was somewhat similar to Qin Qing Di's. Guan Xiyu and Mei Qinglian had both seen Qin Qing Di in action before. In fact, their guesses were not wrong. For Chu Xiu to be able to use such a fist intent, the punch that Qin Qing Di had displayed back at the Jailing Dong clan had given Chu Xiu of great inspiration. Of Qin Qing Di of Chu Xiu was not Xia Shaolu. He was not a personal disciple of Qin Qing Di. Of course, it was impossible for him to be taught the true fist intent. However, he could learn from others. Compared to other martial artists who did not have a master, Chu Xiu's only advantage was that he was willing to think. Most of the martial artists who did not have a master would only be shocked when they watched the fight of the powerhouses. They would only be a bystander watching the show. They would only shout 666 at the side and sigh at the strength of the powerhouses and how strong their martial technique was. This would increase the capital that they could brag about in the future. However, Chu Xiu was different. He would think about why these powerhouses were so strong, where they were strong, and how he could become so strong. This habit made it so that Chu Xiu would gain some comprehension every time he fought or watched other experts fight, and he would make some slight progress. Although it was only a small amount, when accumulated, the benefits that these comprehensions could bring to Chu Xiu could be seen with the naked eye. At this time, Fang Sha's eyes also revealed a look of surprise. How long had it been? How did Chu Xiu's strength increase to such an extent? Fang Sha's heart sank. Before, he thought that Chu Xiu was arrogant, but now it seemed that Chu Xiu was not arrogant at all. He really had the confidence to fight him head-on. Thinking of this, Fang Sha did not retreat. Instead, he advanced. Killing intent condensed around his body. Wisps of crimson gang qi filled his palms. Endless power of heaven and earth was drawn by it. In an instant, it turned into a large net that enveloped Chu Xiu. The strands of stellar energy that were filled with killing intent were all-pervasive, sealing off all the places Chu Xiu could evade and enveloping him. So long as he was touched by even a strand, the strands of stellar energy would tighten tighter and tighter, and in the end, it would strangle Chu Xiu to death. Of course, Fang Sha would not kill Chu Xiu in front of Guan Xiyu. However, weapons had no eyes, and fists and feet had no heart. It was still very necessary to teach Chu Xiu a lesson that he would never forget. Facing the all-pervasive net, the sun, moon, and stars in Chu Xiu's eyes rotated. He executed the heaven's sun gazing at air to the extreme. Instead of retreating, he advanced. His figure was like a fish swimming back and forth in the net, but he was able to avoid being enveloped by the net every time. Seeing that Chu Xiu's figure was getting closer and closer, Fang Sha's heart was filled with impatience. What kind of trick is this Chu Xiu using? He can actually see through my thoughts and dodge in advance? A cold look flashed in Fang Sha's eyes. He formed a seal with both hands, and in an instant, boundless heaven and earth yuan qi surged into the threads of gang qi. With so much power surging into them in an instant, the threads of gang qi could no longer withstand it. With a loud bang, they all exploded. Chu Xiu, who was in the center, had nowhere to hide at all. However, the moment the gang qi exploded, Chu Xiu also made a move. Chu Xiu held the fearless seal in his hand. Buddhist light bloomed around him, condensing into the phantom of Vairocana that appeared behind him. The Buddhist light shone for eternity, but it remained majestic in the midst of the explosion of the threads of gang qi. The Great Sun Shifting Technique. This was a martial art that belonged to Master Tam Yuan. It was rarely seen among the Central Plains warriors, but its powerful explosive power could completely allow Chu Xiu to take a full-powered blow from a martial Dao master. Under the shroud of the Buddhist light, Chu Xiu's figure had already rushed in front of Fang Sha. As his fist landed, the Buddhist light and demonic qi bloomed with unparalleled power. Fang Sha harumphed coldly and unleashed the heavens decimating earth annihilating oblivion killing fist. Compared to Chu Xiu's heavens decimating earth annihilating oblivion killing fist, Fang Sha's punch was even purer. As the punch landed, gang qi exploded. However, Chu Xiu seemed to be unfazed by it and continued to throw punch after punch, completely clashing head-on with Fang Sha. However, the other spectators frowned. By doing this, Chu Xiu seemed to have the intention of attacking Fang Sha's strength with his own weakness. Although they admitted that Chu Xiu's explosive power was indeed very strong, he was not a martial Dao master after all and had not condensed the martial Dao true core. If he continued to clash head-on, the one who could not afford to waste time was still Chu Xiu. At the same time, Fang Sha also noticed this. He did not retreat at all and clashed head-on with Chu Xiu. Although Fang Sha's qi and blood were also boiling under the powerful force, Chu Xiu was not much better off. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly withdrew his fist and took a few steps back. He formed a seal with his hands, and in an instant, boundless demonic qi erupted, triggering the qi and blood in Fang Sha's body. At this moment, Fang Sha suddenly had a bad feeling. I've been tricked. He had forgotten that Chu Xiu also knew the demonic book's demonic blood technique. Originally, the demonic blood technique was not very useful for martial Dao grandmasters. However, just now, Chu Xiu had exchanged dozens of punches with Fang Sha, and each punch was full force. The power was so great that it was enough to shake the qi and blood in Fang Sha's body, and this was the best time to use the demonic blood technique. Fang Sha groaned in pain, and his face turned red. The qi and blood in his body were boiling as if a pot was boiling. Boundless demonic qi shrouded him, and wisps of qi and blood were sucked out along with the demonic qi, floating around Chu Xiu's body, making Chu Xiu look even more evil at this time. Fang Sha roared, and the martial Dao true core rotated wildly in his body, accepting the world into his body and suppressing his body, finally suppressing the boiling qi and blood. However, at this time, what greeted him was Chu Xiu's saber. An ultimate saber surrounded by endless blood qi and demonic qi. Everyone in the pugilistic world knew that Chu Xiu used a saber. At first, Fang Sha also found it strange that Chu Xiu did not use a weapon. Could it be that there was something wrong with his demonic saber? However, when the two sides fought to the extreme, Fang Sha also subconsciously ignored this point. It was only now that Chu Xiu finally slashed out this fatal saber. The blood qi absorbed from Fang Sha's body was not enough to condense into the blood-dissipating saber, but Chu Xiu condensed it on the edge of the saber, turning it into a blood-red blade that also had the effect of breaking the opponent's protective aura. Boundless demonic qi wrapped around the saber, surging and surging, like a saber slashed out from hell. It turned into a boundless mournful wail, slashing down on Fang Sha's head. Although Chu Xiu's previous attacks were not weak, they did not make Fang Sha feel threatened. But now, this saber really made Fang Sha's hair stand on end. Therefore, his first reaction was to retreat, and his second was to dodge. However, just as Fang Sha moved, he felt a strange qi locked tightly on him. Fang Sha had just moved a little when Chu Xiu's saber momentum had already followed him closely. In the span of a few breaths, Fang Sha had changed his body 32 times, but Chu Xiu had seen through him 33 times. Among them, there was one time when he did not even change his body and Chu Xiu had already seen through him. For martial Dao experts, a breath's time was very long. Therefore, after a few breaths, Fang Sha was shocked to find that Chu Xiu's saber was already upon him. He did not even have the last chance to dodge. Fang Sha roared angrily, and blood-colored Gang Qi burst out from his body. However, Chu Xiu's saber cut through his Gang Qi like it was tofu. It directly tore through his protective Gang Qi, and raging demonic Qi erupted. The blood-killing saber's unique characteristic was that it could easily break through the opponent's Gang Qi defense by absorbing Qi and blood from the opponent. Although Chu Xiu was not using the complete version of the blood-killing saber, and had only added a layer of sharpness to his heavenly demon dance, this characteristic was still retained. Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance was gently placed on Fang Sha's neck. The extremely sharp aura caused Fang Sha's hair to stand on end, and his eyes were still filled with disbelief. "I've actually lost." Chu Xiu did not withdraw his saber. He merely looked at Fang Sha and said indifferently, "Thank you for letting me win." In fact, he could have killed Fang Sha with a single slash just now. However, in the current situation, killing Fang Sha would not make things any easier for Chu Xiu. Moreover, if Chu Xiu were to kill Fang Sha in front of Guan Siyu and An Liuyan, he would really be treating the two martial Dao masters like decorations. Chapter 542. In fact, everyone had already speculated that Chu Xiu had been defeated by Fang Sha. After all, Chu Xiu had the battle record of killing a martial Dao master. What if he still had some trump cards up his sleeves? However, no one had expected that Chu Xiu would defeat Fang Sha as easily as crushing dry weeds. How powerful was Chu Xiu? Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance was still stuck to Fang Sha's neck. The cold aura made Fang Sha feel the cruelty of reality. He wanted to say something, but he could not say it in the end. Fang Sha was actually a little unconvinced. Even he had never imagined that he would lose in such a baffling manner. He still had a trump card that he had not used, but he had lost in the end. What was going on? However, under the watchful eyes of everyone, he was a martial Dao master and a senior of the Guangzhong torture room. If he were to go back on his word and say that he wanted to compete again, would he still have any face left? Fang Sha did not know how he had lost, but Guan Siyu and Mei Qinglian understood. Both of them looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look in their eyes. Chu Xiu's control over the rhythm of the battle was simply terrifying. Chu Xiu had been able to win this battle not only because of his powerful strength, but also because of the strangeness of his blood transformation saber and the power of his final saber move. Instead, it was because of Chu Xiu's control over the rhythm of the battle. From the beginning, Fang Sha had fallen into Chu Xiu's rhythm. Every step he took was completely within Chu Xiu's expectations. When Chu Xiu finally slashed with his saber, the outcome was already clear. Perhaps this was not a battle of life and death, and Fang Sha had not taken out his trump card in a battle of life and death. However, at the same time, Chu Xiu also had trump cards that he had not used. In another battle, Chu Xiu could also change his tactics on the spot, and the result was unpredictable. This kind of control of the rhythm of the battle was not something that could be taught. It could only be said that Chu Xiu was gifted and extremely sensitive to the situation of the battle. If it were someone else, they would not be able to think of this in such a fierce battle. He did not dare to think of these messy things. Fang Sha pushed aside Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance with resentment and turned to leave. No matter what the reason was, he had already lost. It was impossible to fight again. In any case, he had lost a lot of face this time. Guan Siyu stood up and said in a deep voice, "We've fought, and we've competed. This matter is settled. When Xiafanshan opens, An Liuyan, Chu Xiu, and I will enter." The outcome was set. Xiao Yi and Chu Simo were currently shocked by Chu Xiu's strength, while Yin Batong left secretly. In the past, Yin Batong had dared to provoke Chu Xiu because he relied on his experience in the Guanzhong torture room and his relationship with Fang Sha. In the end, even a martial Dao master like Fang Sha had lost to Chu Xiu. This made Yin Batong simply unable to believe it. At the same time, a sense of danger arose in his heart. After this, if Chu Xiu wanted to take revenge on him, what could he use to resist? However, Yin Batong had underestimated Chu Xiu. Right now, Chu Xiu's heart was on Xianxia. How could he still have the leisure to take revenge on him? After the matter was over, Guan Siyu looked for Liuyan and Chu Xiu and gave each of them a key to Xianxia. And Liuyan left with a dark expression after receiving the key, but Guan Siyu did not mind. After Liuyan left, Chu Xiu looked at his back and said in a deep voice, "Hall Master, the Punishment Bureau is the trump card of the Guanzhong torture room. Most of the Punishment Hall's resources are provided to the Punishment Bureau, but the great leader doesn't even have the slightest bit of respect for you. This is a little too much. In my opinion, the problem of the Guanzhong torture room isn't external, but internal." Guan Siyu sighed and said, "Of course I know that, but the Guanzhong torture room can't be messed up. And Liuyan is from the same generation as Hall Master Chu Kuanga. He has a group of trusted subordinates in the Punishment Bureau, and he has considerable prestige. Most importantly, he is one of the trump cards of the Guanzhong torture room. If something happens to me or I'm not in the Punishment Hall, and Liuyan will be the only one who can handle things on his own. You don't have to take this matter to heart. And Liuyan isn't targeting you. When Xianxia opens, you just have to go in." After hearing Guan Siyu's words, Chu Xiu did not continue to sow discord. He merely bowed and turned to leave. Some things only needed to be said once. Saying it too many times would incur disgust. After Chu Xiu left Guan Siyu's place, he was secretly called over by Mei Qinglian. In the Punishment Hall's backyard, Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu with a frown and said, "You were a little rash today. Even if you didn't challenge Fang Sha, I was confident that I could get you the right to enter Xianxia. In the end, you provoked him. Once you lose, there's no turning back." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "It's precisely because I have the confidence to win that I challenged him. Isn't it better to convince some people? Moreover, I'm not being rash. It's just that sometimes, I have to bear with it, but I can't lose my drive." Saintus, with all due respect, the hidden devil lineage has lost some of its drive. It's fine for sects like the Phaseless Demon sect that are still active in the pugilistic world. However, some people have been hiding in the dark for a long time and think that hiding is their main goal. They have forgotten why they have to hide. Mei Qinglian's expression immediately turned cold. She frowned and a cold aura slowly spread out. She said coldly, "Are you saying that I've lost my drive?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Honest advice is unpleasant to the ear. Saintus, please don't take it personally. This is just a suggestion. If Saintus doesn't want to hear it, I'll take it back." Chu Xiu was not deliberately provoking Mei Qinglian. He was indeed speaking the truth. If the hidden devil lineage could only hide in the dark for the rest of their lives, then the hidden devil lineage would really be finished. Moreover, Chu Xiu was not being honest when he said that in front of Mei Qinglian. Chu Xiu felt that it was time for him to change his position. Previously, Chu Xiu needed Mei Qinglian's help to gain a foothold in the Guanzhong torture room. He also needed the secret support of the hidden devil lineage. Now that Chu Xiu had the strength to face a martial Dao grandmaster head-on, although he would not burn the bridge after crossing the river, he should at least change his treatment. Seeing Chu Xiu's indifferent expression, Mei Qinglian suddenly understood something. She retracted the aura around her and snorted, "If one is strong enough, no one would be willing to stay in the dark and be a local mouse. You saw how Liuyan was today. I wanted to kill him on the spot, but didn't I have to endure it for the time being? Chu Xiu, since you're a member of the hidden devil lineage, then you should know the situation of the hidden devil lineage. What the hidden devil lineage lacks is not strength, but opportunity." If it was the previous Chu Xiu, if Chu Xiu dared to speak to Mei Qinglian in such a tone, Mei Qinglian would definitely let him know what was called the rules. However, when she thought of the might Chu Xiu displayed when he defeated Fang Sha, the current Chu Xiu was enough for Mei Qinglian to speak to him as an equal and explain things to him calmly. People from the devil lineage were much more realistic than those from the righteous lineage. As long as one had the strength, everything would be fine. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Heroes make the situation, and the situation makes the hero. The opportunity might come at any time." After exchanging a few more pleasantries with Mei Qinglian, Chu Xiu directly returned to the Guanxi land to wait for news. Before entering the Xiaofan heaven, Chu Xiu had to at least adjust his condition to the peak. Looking at Chu Xiu's departing figure, Mei Qinglian's eyes revealed a hint of incomprehension. After a while, Mei Qinglian murmured softly, "Lu Jin, what kind of guy did you bring into the hidden devil lineage?" Originally, Mei Qinglian thought that she could see through Chu Xiu. It was only now that Mei Qinglian realized that she had never seen through Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu was definitely the kind of person who was unwilling to submit to others. Chu Xiu's ambition was written on his face and seeped into his bones. When Mei Qinglian first came into contact with Chu Xiu was still very obedient at that time. He was even considered by Mei Qinglian and the phaseless devil sect to be someone worthy of training. But she did not know when Chu Xiu had grown to such a realm. He was even strong enough to talk to her as an equal, and he even dared to talk to her as an equal. If this kind of thing happened in some famous righteous sects, it would be disrespectful and presumptuous. However, in the devil lineage, whether it was the bright devil lineage or the hidden devil lineage, the first thing that everyone valued was strength. Almost no one would care about those false reputations. Therefore, regarding Chu Xiu's attitude just now, Mei Qinglian was not too angry, because these were all what Chu Xiu deserved. However, this Chu Xiu's change was so fast that it was enough to prove his deep scheming. Even now, Mei Qinglian could not understand what Chu Xiu was thinking. Such a person was definitely not easy to deal with. Whether Chu Xiu's existence was good or bad for the hidden devil lineage, Mei Qinglian did not know. Shaking her head, Mei Qinglian did not think about these messy things for the time being. The hidden devil lineage was originally a mix of good and bad people. To put it bluntly, there were not many people in the hidden devil lineage who were easy to deal with. Now that there was an ambitious Chu Xiu, it did not seem to be a big deal. Moreover, her hidden devil lineage had already declined to the extent that she was the only one left, so Mei Qinglian could not be bothered to care about these things. Chu Xiu was brought into the hidden devil lineage by Lu Jin. In the future, if anything happened, the phaseless devil sect would be the one to shoulder it. At this time, Chu Xiu did not know what Mei Qinglian was thinking, and he did not care. Today, his attitude was deliberately done for Mei Qinglian to see. After returning to the Guanxi branch, Chu Xiu immediately opened the box containing the little mortal key. However, the so-called key in the box made Chu Xiu slightly stunned. It turned out to be a strange, irregularly shaped stone, as if it was knocked off from something. Chapter 543. In Chu Xiu's eyes, the so-called minor mortal world's key was just an irregular stone. It didn't have any energy on it. It was strange because the stone was too hard. In the beginning, Chu Xiu only tried to pinch it. When he found that it didn't budge, he tried using his astral qi, but there was no reaction. In the end, Chu Xiu even used the heavenly demon dance to slash the stone twice, but it still didn't leave a scratch. This was very shocking. Holding the stone, Chu Xiu thought for a while, then got up and went to find Lu Fengxian. The matter of minor mortal world was a secret to other rogue cultivators, but to those big sects that had the qualifications to enter minor mortal world, it wasn't a big secret. Naturally, Chu Xiu wouldn't hide it from Lu Fengxian. After explaining the matter of minor mortal world, Chu Xiu took out the stone and asked Shui Wuxiang and the others, "Have you heard of minor mortal world in ancient times? Have you seen this thing before?" Shui Wuxiang and the other three were people who had survived from the ancient era. The things they knew should be much more than the current martial artists. Shui Wuxiang shook his head and said, when we were sealed, the great ancient calamity hadn't started yet, so we don't know what happened in the last period of time. But I can guarantee that there definitely wasn't anything like minor mortal world in ancient times. Speaking up to here, Shui Wuxiang suddenly froze. He picked up the stone in Chu Xiu's hand and carefully looked at it. Is this thing invulnerable to swords and spears, water and fire, and even astral qi can't destroy it? Chu Xiu nodded. Shui Wuxiang murmured, I was wondering why it looked so familiar. If I didn't guess wrong, this thing should be a fragment of the Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument. But how could the Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument break? Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument? What's that? Shui Wuxiang said, the Mortal Heaven Boundary Steel is the Mortal Heaven Boundary Steel. No one knows what it is. When you mentioned the 3 words Lesser Mortal Sky, and the material of this stone, I thought of it. In ancient times, there was a stone tablet erected at the peak of the highest mountain in the West Pole, Mount Tiansong. On it were the words Mortal World. However, no one knew who set up the stone monument. There were no energy waves coming from it, and no one knew what Mortal Heaven meant. Over time, the stone monument came to be known as the Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument. Also, in ancient times, there were countless people who had tested this Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument. Although there were no energy fluctuations coming from it, it was incomparably sturdy. Even divine weapons were unable to leave a scratch on it. Countless experts had tested it before, but it was all useless. The stone in your hand is exactly the same color as the Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument. In the ancient times, the reason why Marquis Lu Wenho was defeated and killed and his spirit was sealed was actually because of bad luck. All sorts of coincidences made him the enemy of the world. If Marquis Lu Wenho didn't die, then he would truly be invincible in the world. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, since Brother Lu also has a key, then we can all wait here for news. I'm afraid that the day of Small Mortal Heaven's opening is not far. Small Mortal Heaven opened every 30 years. Although there were some differences in the specific time, the difference was only a few days. Therefore, during this period of time, the various sects and the wind agents of Wind's sweeping pavilion would pay close attention to the slightest movement in the pugilistic world. Once there were any abnormalities, they would immediately send people to investigate. At this moment, in an ordinary forest on Wei Prefecture's Shangmang Mountain, the entire mountain suddenly opened up and twisted. A large amount of spirit qi burst out, causing the originally dense forest on Shangmang Mountain to become even denser. The changes in Wei Prefecture quickly attracted the attention of many people. Among them, the first to receive the news was Wei Prefecture's largest sect, Azure Wave Sword Sect. At this moment, Azure Wave Sword Sect's eldest disciple, Do Guangchen, was excitedly reporting this matter to Lu Gongyuan. Everyone knew that during the first 6 hours of Small Mortal Heaven's opening, anyone could enter. Even an ordinary person could enter. This was the pavilion closest to the water enjoys moonlight first, something that completely depended on luck. In the history of the pugilistic world, there were many rogue martial artists who encountered Small Mortal Heaven opening not far away from them. They were then accidentally swept into it and eventually obtained the opportunity. This time, Small Mortal Heaven opened near Azure Wave Sword Sect. This was simply a great opportunity bestowed to Azure Wave Sword Sect by the heavens. However, compared to the excited Do Guangchen, Lu Gongyuan's face didn't have the slightest expression. He was still holding a stone in his hand, which was also the key to Small Mortal Heaven. With Azure Wave Sword Sect's current strength, it was already very good for them to have a key. Lu Gongyuan had also entered Small Mortal Heaven before, but people only knew that there were opportunities inside, but they didn't know that there wasn't a land full of opportunities in the world. There were many opportunities in Small Mortal Heaven, but the dangers were 10 times or even 100 times more than the opportunities. Lu Gongyuan was already old, and there wasn't much use in entering Small Mortal Heaven again. Therefore, he prepared this key for Shenbai. In the end, Shenbai was crippled and was still in seclusion in Azure Wave Sword Sect's secret ground. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive, but Small Mortal Heaven just happened to appear in Wei County. This was truly ironic. When Dou Guangqian saw that Lu Gongyuan didn't speak, he quickly said, "Master, hurry up and give the order for all disciples of Azure Wave Sword Sect to enter small mortal heaven. This is a great opportunity bestowed to Azure Wave Sword Sect by the heavens." Lu Gongyuan shook his head and said, "We can't all enter." Dou Guangqian was stunned. Why? Other sects needed to rely on keys to enter, but even a sect like the Great Light Temple didn't have many keys. Other forces would even fight to the death for a key just to obtain the qualification to enter small mortal heaven. Now that Azure Wave Sword Sect could obviously let the entire sect enter, why didn't Lu Gongyuan agree? Looking at Dou Guangqian, Lu Gongyuan sighed and said, "Don't be blinded by benefits." When everyone mentioned small mortal heaven, they would only mention the opportunities within, but who would think about the dangers within? Those who could enter small mortal heaven were all experts from the righteous and demonic lineages, or the elites on the Lone Hu list. Even martial Dao masters had the risk of dying in there. If you weren't strong enough, you might even lose your life for some opportunities, let alone taking them away. And in small mortal heaven, the real danger wasn't the various traps inside, but the people. Small mortal heaven had been opened so many times, and there were countless rogue martial artists who accidentally entered, but how many of them could actually walk out with the opportunities? Only a handful. If my Azure Wave Sword Sect used all our strength to enter, do you believe that not only would we not be able to obtain any benefits, but there might not even be 1 out of 100 who would be able to come out alive? But Dou Guangqian was still unwilling. But the opportunities are right in front of us. If we stop because of the fear of danger, this disciple is unwilling. Lu Gongyuan let out a sigh and said, "Forget it. Then you can bring your men in. But you have to explain the dangers to the other disciples. Those who are willing to enter and fight with you can enter the minor mortal sky. Those who are not willing will guard the Azure Water Sword Sect with me and continue the legacy of the sect." Dou Guangqian was stunned. "Master, are you not going?" Lu Gongyuan shook his head. "I am already old and can't fight anymore. The intensity of the competition in small mortal heaven is definitely beyond your imagination. I may not be afraid of death, but I have to protect the last trace of hope for Azure Wave Sword Sect." As he spoke, Lu Gongyuan looked towards the back mountain, where Shenbai was in seclusion. That was the last hope of his Azure Wave Sword Sect, but it was also a hope with an uncertain future. Chapter 544. The Wei County of the country of Yan had never been considered prosperous. In the past, the Wei County was the Wei Kingdom, a vassal state of eastern Qi. After the Wei Kingdom was destroyed by the country of Yan, the entire Wei County was hostile to the northern Yan, regardless of whether it was the common people or the sects of the martial arts world. Moreover, it was impossible for the northern Yan to slaughter the people of the entire Wei County. Hence, the Wei County had always been an ungoverned area and developed on its own. Usually, it was rare to see the warriors of eastern Qi and northern Yan coming to the Wei County. However, with the opening of Xiaofan Heaven, all the sects came after hearing the news and entered with the key in hand. There were also some warriors who did not enter but were waiting outside to receive them. When people mentioned Xiaofan Heaven, they only knew about the opportunities within, but they did not forget about the dangers within. If the warriors who came out were seriously injured and on the verge of death, they would be able to rescue them in time. When Guan Siyu and Chu Xiu arrived, there were already countless martial artists gathered outside Xiaofan Heaven. There were people from the various sects who were in charge of receiving them. There were also some people who didn't have the qualifications but wanted to watch the show from the outside. After arriving, Lionian said coldly, "I'll go in first." After saying that, Lionian took a step forward and entered the twisted forest in front of him. His figure disappeared within it. Everyone who entered Xiaofan Heaven would be sent to a random place, so there was no need to enter together. Xiaofan Heaven would exist for 10 days. After 10 days, Xiaofan Heaven would disappear into the space and everyone would be expelled. Moreover, there would be some restrictions in entering Xiaofan Heaven, such as strength. There was no lower limit for the warriors who entered Xiaofan Heaven, but there was an upper limit. As long as an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm entered, he would definitely be suppressed by the rules of Xiaofan Heaven, and the power of heaven and earth would constantly crush him. So once an expert at the true fire spirit refinement stage entered it, it was practically impossible for him to move a single step. He could only forcefully rely on his own strength to resist the surging energy of heaven and earth, and it was simply a waste of effort. Therefore, after trying a few times, the true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse stopped trying and left the opportunity to others. However, this was not bad. After all, the power of the true fire spirit refinement realm was there. If a powerhouse of the true fire spirit refinement realm were to make a move, the entire minor mortal heaven could only become a battlefield for top sects like the Great Light Temple or the moon-worshipping cult to fight. The other sects that did not have the true fire spirit refinement realm would not even be able to get the leftovers. Before coming here, Guan Siyu had already given Chu Xiu a booklet. It was filled with descriptions of the various sects' geographical locations and dangers in Xiaofan heaven over the years. However, this thing wasn't very useful. The outside world was changing, and so was the world in lesser mortal heaven. Even the terrain was changing at the same time for some unknown reason. Now that 30 years had passed, no one knew what had changed inside. When the people in the outside world saw Chu Xiu come with Guan Siyu, it immediately caused a commotion. The Guanzhong torture room was very low-key in the outside world, but Guan Siyu was actually quite famous. As Chu Kuanga's successor and one of the top 10 existences on the leaderboard, almost everyone knew Guan Siyu. Moreover, Chu Xiu was an outstanding person ranked 4th on the Longhu leaderboard. He would definitely be one of the main characters entering Xiaofan heaven. However, Chu Xiu had offended many people in the underworld. In addition, his reputation wasn't very good. Therefore, his appearance only caused some commotion, but no one came to talk to him. Guan Siyu said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, "Are you going to enter with me later, or are you going to wait for your friend?" Guan Siyu was talking about Lu Fengxian. Before he came, Lu Fengxian had already stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm with the help of Lu Wenho's real spirit fragment. However, he still needed to consolidate his realm, so he didn't set off with Chu Xiu. However, he would be able to arrive in time in a day or two. However, Lu Fengxian wasn't from the Guanzhong torture room. Of course, Guan Siyu wouldn't waste time waiting for Lu Fengxian. As for Lu Fengxian having the key, Chu Xiu didn't hide it from Guan Siyu. Based on Guan Siyu's character, he wouldn't snatch Lu Fengxian's key. Moreover, ever since the battle with the Dong family in Jianghu, everyone in the pugilistic world had heard that Heaven Alliance's Qinqing favored Marquis Jr. one, Lu Fengxian. He was considered half of Lu Fengxian's backer. If anyone wanted to touch Lu Fengxian, they would have to weigh their own weight. Chu Xiu said, "I still have to wait for Brother Lu for a while." "Hall Master, you can go in first." Guan Siyu nodded and said, "All right, you should hurry up. Xiaofan heaven is only open for 10 days. Don't waste it. Remember, although you have the strength to fight a martial Dao Grand Master now, martial Dao Grand Masters who are qualified to enter Xiaofan heaven, even if they are itinerant cultivators, are not weak. If you encounter a martial Dao Grand Master, hide if you can. Don't be too arrogant and treat your opponent as a martial Dao Grand Master." Unlike the others in Xiafanshan, Chu Xiu's opponents were only the elites of the younger generation and martial artists below the martial Dao Grand Master realm. Guan Siyu was also afraid that Chu Xiu would be hot-blooded and provoke some martial Dao Grand Masters. That would be courting death. Chu Xiu nodded. After Guan Siyu entered Xiaofan heaven, Chu Xiu stood there alone and waited. Actually, Chu Xiu was not only waiting for Lu Fengxian, but also Xia Xiaolu and the others. Chu Xiu's popularity in the pugilistic world was not very good, but he was not to the extent that he was surrounded by enemies. After Xia Xiaolu and the others came, Chu Xiu could join forces with them and discuss a few places. After entering Xiaofan heaven, they would find a chance to gather together. This was also the experience of the various sects over the years. Because the rules of heaven and earth in Xiaofan heaven were different from the outside world, communication jade slips and the like could not be used. Moreover, because of the changing terrain, there was no landmark. The various sects could only use the stupid method, which was to directly set up several gathering points in a direction. After randomly teleporting, they would rush to those places. If there was no one to gather, they would just keep moving forward. Anyway, they would always gather in the end. In less than half a day, Chu Xiu had already waited here, and there were already people from various sects coming here one after another. On the Buddhist side, the people from Sabodhi Monastery had already entered before Chu Xiu came. It was said that there were 2 old monks and a middle-aged monk, and there were no young people. This was very normal for Sabodhi Monastery. Sabodhi Monastery's Dharma cultivation was extremely demanding on one's own Dharma cultivation. The young disciples were still in the monastery reciting Buddhist scriptures. Most of the disciples from Sabodhi Monastery who were qualified to wander in the pugilistic world were not young. Because the Great Light Temple was far away in the north, no one had come yet. Instead, all the people from Daoist sect had arrived first. The Chunyang Daoist sect had sent an old Taoist and 4 young Taoists. The old Taoist had a horsetail whisk in his left hand and a sword in his right. His pure yang qi was unstoppable. Although he was old, he was as dazzling as the morning sun. On the other hand, although the 4 young people had the strength of 5 qis collecting in the origin state, they seemed a little immature. The Chunyang Dao sect was the standard orthodox Dao sect. The pure yang qi of Dao sect was vast and mighty. It could kill evil and suppress demons, and its power was well known in the pugilistic world. Over the years, as long as there was a major event like killing evil spirits, the Chunyang Dao sect would be involved. Moreover, they were not afraid of death, which was very admirable. In addition, the Chunyang Dao sect usually did not fight for anything and kept a low profile. Therefore, they were not hated by others. Other than their stubborn character, Chunyang Dao sect had a good reputation in the pugilistic world. However, a few years ago, the young genius of the Chunyang Dao sect was killed by Li Feilian, who was ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard and previously ranked 4th on the Longhu leaderboard. The younger generation of the Chunyang Dao sect was somewhat unable to recover from the setback. The cultivation method of the Chunyang Dao sect was originally the most focused on the foundation. The cultivation was slow, so it was not easy to train the younger generation of disciples. Now that one was dead, it would take a lot of time to train another disciple who could stand on his own. After the old Taoist arrived, the surrounding people of the pugilistic world greeted the old Taoist and called him Taoist Master Jianyang. The old Taoist had a strong background. He was one of the 6 Taoist masters of the Tiangang Hall of the Chunyang Dao sect, Jianyang Zi. The Tiangang Hall of the Chunyang Dao sect had its own Tiangang formation. It enshrined the memorial tablets of the ancestors of the Chunyang Dao sect and the secret scripture of the Chunyang Dao sect, Pure Yang Dao scripture. It could be said to be the most important place in the entire Chunyang Dao sect. Usually, the Tiangang Hall was guarded by 6 martial Dao masters. They were known as the 6 Taoist masters of the hall, and Jianyang Zi was one of them. After looking around, Jianyang Zi said in a deep voice, "Everyone, did you see the gang of slayers from the demon sect? I'm afraid those demon bastards can't sit still when the Xiaofan heaven is opened. This is not the first time I've entered the Xiaofan heaven. This time, I'm not here for the opportunity, but to kill a few slayers from the demon sect to loosen my muscles." Someone immediately complimented him. He is indeed Taoist Elder Jianyang. He really abhors evil. Those guys from the demon sect probably heard of Taoist Master Jianyang's reputation and they are so scared that they don't dare to show up. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes as he looked at Jianyangzi. When it came to their attitudes towards the demonic path, the Temple of Great Light and the Pure Yang Daoist sect were the most extreme. They would not tolerate even a speck of dust in their eyes, and they would almost attack the moment they met. However, in Chu Xiu's opinion, the way the Chunyang Dao sect did it was a little stupid. The Great Light Temple dared to do so because they had the strength. Although the Chunyang Dao sect was not weak, they were inferior to the Great Light Temple. In the end, after so many years, the Chunyang Dao sect still did things their own way. There were many martial artists who died in the battle with the demon sect. Even the people from the demon sect would have a headache when they saw the martial artists from the Chunyang Dao sect. These guys were simply one-track minded. Unless they could not beat them, they would not stop until one of them died when they met. However, at this moment, a voice sneered, "Jianyang Zi, you're a toad yawning. What a big tone. I'm right here. Kill me if you have the ability. Have you forgotten how Chang Qingzi, one of the 6 temple protectors, died? You don't know what you're talking about." A pale-faced middle-aged man wearing a white robe embroidered with cloud patterns and a white jade crown descended from the top of the forest. His aura was incomparably powerful, and his demonic aura even dyed the clouds above his head black. "Lord Yun Zhongjuan." Someone below immediately exclaimed. It was Lord Yun Zhongjuan, one of the 9 great god magi of the moon-worshipping cult. Chapter 545. Moon-worshipping cult's 9 great god magispriests were famous. Yun Zhongjuan's strength was enough to rank in the top 3 among the 9 great god magispriests. He was probably not far from the true fire spirit refinement realm. Some of the martial artists present looked at Yun Zhongjuan and Jianyang Zi with the mentality of watching a show. One was a diabolism tyrant, the other was a Dao sect perfected master who hated evil. If these two were to fight, they would probably be badly beaten before even entering Xiaofan heaven. At this moment, Chu Xiu's gaze was on the people behind Yun Zhongjuan. Led by moon-worshipping cult Saintess, behind her were 9 young disciples of moon-worshipping cult and some young elite disciples who had reached the unity of heaven and man realm. In this way, moon-worshipping cult had a total of 11 keys. This accumulation was really terrifying. Moreover, Chu Xiu also discovered a problem. For big sects like moon-worshipping cult and Chunyang Dao sect, they did not give all the keys to martial Dao Grand Masters. Instead, they only sent one expert who had the strength to control the situation, and the rest of the keys were given to the younger generation of disciples. Of course, this did not mean that these big sects would be modest, but it was a manifestation of their deep accumulation. In the booklet that Guan Siyu gave to Chu Xiu, there was a description of the spirit energy in Xiaofan heaven. It was rich in spirit energy and there were countless rare treasures. However, because the rules were different from the outside world, the first time you entered, your body would be cleansed by the spirit energy. The elixirs and opportunities obtained from there were also different from the outside world. The effect was also the greatest for the first time. However, the second time he entered, the effects would be halved, and any opportunities that could strengthen his cultivation would be greatly reduced. The third time he entered, the original foundation would be halved again. Therefore, entering Xiaofan heaven too many times was actually a bit of a waste because the things you could obtain would become less and less. After realizing this, those big sects figured out the rules and formulated such a rule to give most of the opportunities to the younger generation of martial artists. If these young martial artists obtained opportunities and stepped into the martial Dao Grand Master realm, they would have the opportunity to enter Xiaofan heaven again in the future. Therefore, for these martial artists who came from big sects, as long as they could become martial Dao Grand Masters, almost everyone would have 2 chances to enter Xiaofan heaven. Although they would compete, they would not fight for it. For example, the Guanzhong torture room had 3 keys. Although it was not as extravagant as the moon-worshipping cult, it was not a small number. In the end, they still had to rely on internal strife to decide who could go and who could not. The difference in their background was not just a little bit. At this moment, Jianyang Zi's face darkened when he saw Yun Zhongjuan's arrogant words. Without saying a word, the pure Yang Dao sword in his hand shone with a dazzling brilliance. Pure Yang energy descended like the sun. With a swing of the sword, all techniques were destroyed, and it slashed towards Yun Zhongjuan. Good timing. Yun Zhongjuan let out a long laugh. With a wave of his wide sleeves, the heavens and earth were instantly tainted by demonic energy. Boundless black clouds of demonic energy swept over like a tornado, wrapping around Jianyang Zi's pure Yang sword astral sword. With a flick of his sleeves, a series of ear-piercing explosions rang out. The pure Yang sword astral sword was directly destroyed. Xianxia snorted coldly and swung the horsetail whisk in his hand. Traces of earth energy seemed to be immersed in it, and the power of heaven and earth was pulled by the horsetail whisk. It stretched for hundreds of feet and directly entangled Yun Zhongjuan. However, Yun Zhongjuan sneered and directly punched out. The demonic aura was vast and mighty, tearing the horsetail whisk into pieces. Xianxia's figure could not help but retreat. Yun Zhongjuan laughed loudly and formed a seal with his hands. The demonic clouds pressed down and turned into the phantom of a demon with 2 horns on its head. It directly shrouded Xianxia and directly attacked. Just at this moment, a deafening sound of thunder rang out. The violet firmament lightning suddenly exploded, and the demon god's shadow was directly smashed into pieces. Purple heaven thunder. Yun Zhongjuan was shocked and his figure retreated. The others also looked up into the sky. Longhu Mountain's celestial master abode, unparalleled in the world in controlling thunder. In this world, who else could control such thunder other than Longhu Mountain's celestial master abode? Sure enough, a middle-aged man in a white robe with a temperament like a spring breeze walked out from behind. He shook his head and said, "Brother Xianxia, you haven't entered little mortal heaven yet. Why are you wasting your energy here?" Xianxia snorted coldly and said, "Everyone has the right to punish evil. Zhang Xiling, your Longhu Mountain's celestial master abode is in West Chu, but in the end, you just sat and watched the moon-worshipping cult grow to such an extent. Doesn't your celestial master abode feel guilty?" Zhang Xiling was speechless. She was here to mediate, why was she dragged into this? Yun Zhongjuan laughed strangely and said, "So it's Purple Cloud Immortal Lord Zhang Xiling. Some people just don't know what's good for them. It's useless to persuade them." Zhang Xiling said lightly, "What Purple Cloud Immortal Lord? I'm just a Daoist priest in the Golden Light Pavilion who transcribes books." Yun Zhongjuan laughed and said, "His writing is like a thunderbolt and his martial aura is like the sound of thunder. There are only a few people in the entire celestial master abode who are qualified to use the power of thunder to transcribe in the Golden Light Pavilion." Xianxia saw that the 2 of them were actually chatting. He couldn't help but say angrily, "Zhang Xiling, are you still a member of my Taoism lineage? If you are a member of my Taoism lineage, then join forces with me and kill this evil demon." Zhang Xiling instantly frowned. Why can't this old guy understand? Is this a place to kill demons? Moreover, if the celestial master abode could destroy the moon-worshipping cult, they wouldn't have to be neighbors with the moon-worshipping cult for so long. Just now, he had taken action because he was also a member of the Taoism lineage. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have meddled in other people's business and directly entered Xiaofan heaven. At this time, a gentle male voice suddenly said, "Senior Xianxia, when will it be too late to kill the evil demon?" However, for the Chunyang Dao sect, the current task should be to bring the junior brothers of the Chunyang Dao sect into Xiaofan heaven. To kill the evil demon, how can you kill it without improving your own strength? You have the strength, but the other junior brothers don't. As the voice rang out, a handsome young man wearing the same white Taoist robe as Zhang Xiling slowly walked over with his hair draped over his shoulders. In terms of handsomeness, the young man was not as stunning as LV Wenho and Ning Bailu. However, his eyes seemed to have a faint divine light, and the aura around him was ethereal and formless, just like an immortal. In short, this was a man that people could not forget at first glance. Little Celestial Master Zhang Qingjin. There was a sudden exclamation, and almost everyone looked at Zhang Qingjin. Chu Xiu also looked at Zhang Qingjin curiously. One could not blame the crowd for making a fuss, as Zhang Qingjin was really famous. As a genius that only appeared once in 1,000 years in the Celestial Master Abode's Zhang family, Zhang Qingjin was born with a thunder mark on his palm. Legend had it that he was even the reincarnation of a Dao Lord. Since stepping into the pugilistic world, Zhang Qingjin had never tasted defeat. This record was not only against the younger generation of martial artists, but also against the older generation of martial Dao masters. When Chu Xiu killed Xiao Lindong, he was one of the few people in the younger generation who had killed a martial Dao master. However, when Chu Xiu killed Xiao Lindong, he did not see it, and Chu Xiu also had a hard time in that battle. With Yan Qixiao's help, Chu Xiu used all his means to kill Qiao Liandong. However, the scene of Zhang Qingjun killing a martial Dao master was done in front of everyone, and those who saw the battle said that Zhang Qingjun did not even use his full strength. The process was simply an understatement. Therefore, after that battle, some people said that Zhang Qingjun could even step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm at any time. However, he did not break through because he was cultivating a secret method or accumulating his foundation by forcibly suppressing his realm. Although Zhang Qingjun was a younger generation martial artist in name, no one treated him as a junior martial artist because Zhang Qingjun was more terrifying than most martial Dao masters. Seeing that Zhang Qingjun was trying to persuade Jianghu from a different angle, Jianghu snorted coldly when he recalled that he was here on a mission from the sect. "I'll let you off this time, demon. If I ever meet you again in Little Mortal Heaven, I won't let you off easily." After saying that, Jianghu led the disciples of Chunyang Dao sect into Xiafanshan. Yun Zhongjuan looked at Zhang Qingjun and chuckled, "Little celestial master Zhang Qingjun is indeed worthy of your reputation. Your bearing is unparalleled. It's a pity that some people are stubborn and won't listen to advice." Zhang Xiling and Zhang Qingjun did not say anything. Chunyang Dao's sect was like this, and there was nothing they could do. Everyone could see that Yun Zhongjuan's strength was far superior to Jianghu's. If it was someone else, they would have given up for the time being. However, Jianghu was stubborn to the end. No one knew if he was stubborn or if he did not know what was good for him. At this time, Yun Zhongjuan said again, "With your strength, it doesn't seem to make a difference whether you enter Xiafanshan or not. Even the spiritual energy opportunities in Xiafanshan are just icing on the cake for you. I didn't expect you to come this time. I thought you would give the opportunity to other disciples of Celestial Master Mansion." There was no lack of provocation in Yun Zhongjuan's tone, but Zhang Qingjun just said lightly, "I have never seen such a strange mystic realm like Little Mortal Heaven in my life. This time, I will take it as an opportunity to see the world. I'm quite popular in Celestial Master Mansion. Even if I don't have the opportunity, as long as I want to enter, other senior and junior brothers will give the opportunity to me." As soon as he finished speaking, 11 disciples of the Celestial Master Abode walked out of the dense forest behind Zhang Qingjun. They stood behind Zhang Qingjun, which made everyone's eyes turn red with envy. If it were other sects, the 1 or 2 keys would have to be given to martial Dao Grand Masters. Junior martial artists were not qualified to use them at all. However, in the Celestial Master Mansion, such a precious opportunity to enter Xiaofan Heaven could be given around. Chapter 546. The most dangerous thing in Xiaofan Heaven was not the dangers in the secret territory, but the people. It was inevitable that there would be fights to the death between the righteous and demonic sections. However, in the outside world, everyone was relatively restrained. There were only a few people like Jianghu who attacked the demonic sects when they saw them. After Yun Zhongjuan and Zhang Qingjun probed each other for a while, they directly led their respective disciples into Xiaofan Heaven. After the 2 groups of people had left, the crowd sighed in admiration. The little celestial master, Zhang Qingjun, lived up to his name. Although Zhang Qingjun did not attack just now, everyone saw Zhang Qingjun's bearing. This time, the leader of the Longhu Mountain Celestial Master Mansion should be Zhang Xiling. However, as soon as Zhang Qingjun appeared, everyone present almost forgot about Zhang Xiling. They thought that Zhang Qingjun was the leader of the Celestial Master Mansion. This was a brilliant existence. As long as Zhang Qingjun was there, it was enough to cover anyone's brilliance. Chu Xiu waited here for half a day. Quite a few sects came, and there were also some rogue cultivators who held a few keys in their hands. However, most of these people were more obedient. After they arrived, they directly entered Xiaofan Heaven without any delay. Chu Xiu also saw the people from the real martial arts sect. As one of the 3 major Dao sects, the real martial arts sect was very low-key. Only 3 people came. There was only 1 martial arts Grand Master and 2 warriors of the unity of heaven and men realm. This was rather strange. However, the real martial arts sect had always been low-key, but no one in the underworld dared to ignore the real martial arts sect. Even though the Longhu Mountain Celestial Master Mansion was now the leader of the Daoist sects, they still had to respect the real martial arts sect. This was because the real martial arts sect had an immortal, Ning Xuanji, who broke the Kunlun Devil cult and swept the entire underworld. In the past, when the Kunlun Devil cult dominated the world, if Ning Xuanji did not appear out of nowhere and fight Dugu Weiwei, then both of them disappeared. The underworld would still be in a situation where the demonic flames were overflowing and the righteous sects were declining. Therefore, regardless of the current strength of the true martial sect, at least with Ning Xuanji's halo, the status of the true martial sect was still there. In the evening, Chu Xiu even saw the people from the phaseless demon sect arrive. The person leading them was Mr. Liu and two martial artists who were one with the world realm. Mr. Liu also saw Chu Xiu. Their gazes met for a moment, and then they swept past each other like two passers-by. Then, Mr. Liu brought his people into Xiaofan world. In the evening, Lu Fengxian finally arrived with Shui Wuxiang and the other three. Brother Chu, sorry to keep you waiting. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, no worries, Xia Xiaolu and the others probably won't arrive until tomorrow, but you've missed a few good shows. Lu Fengxian was surprised. Oh. What show? Yun Zhongjuan from the moon-worshipping sect fought against Jin Yangzi from the Chunyang Dao sect for a few times. As I thought, none of the 9 divine magispriests of the moon-worshipping sect are weak. Also, little celestial master Zhang Qingjin has arrived. Lu Fengxian asked curiously, what kind of person is little celestial master Zhang Qingjin? People who had never seen Zhang Qingjin before were always curious about Zhang Qingjin. After all, the other party's reputation in the pugilistic world was a little too loud. Lu Fengxian had already heard of Zhang Qingjin's name countless times in the pugilistic world. Chu Xiu muttered, it's a little hard to say, but it's appropriate to describe him with one word, that is, he lives up to his name. The words, lives up to his name, were not too high a compliment. But when one thought of the rumors about Zhang Qingjin in the pugilistic world, these words were very terrifying. Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian sat cross-legged on the ground and chatted. The next morning, Qinqingdi finally arrived with Xia Xiaolu. Seeing that Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian were actually waiting for him here, Xia Xiaolu hurriedly walked over in surprise and said, Brother Chu, Brother Lu, sorry for being late. My master only has one key. In order to let me enter the minor Fan Tian, he went to buy another key. The World Alliance had just risen not long ago, so it was not strange for Qinqingdi to only have one key. However, it was really strange that he could still buy a key. Chu Xiu had a strange expression and said, someone would really sell this thing to you? Xia Xiaolu said, at first, that guy didn't intend to sell it, but then my master insisted on buying it, so he could only sell it. Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian glanced at Qinqingdi's back. So he was forcefully buying and selling? However, this kind of thing was also in line with Qinqingdi's style. Seeing Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian's expressions, Xia Xiaolu hurriedly said, my master is very strict with the rules. The one holding the key is only a small aristocratic family. There was originally a martial Dao grandmaster ancestor in the family, but he passed away many years ago. Many people know that they hold the key in their hands. Now that the minor Fan Tian has opened, if it wasn't for my master, his key would have been snatched away. Moreover, that small aristocratic family is very weak. Even if they enter the minor Fan Tian, they probably won't get anything good. My master gave them a high price, so they didn't lose out. Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian's expressions became even more strange. Qinqingdi knows the rules? He only follows his own rules. Xia Xiaolu greeted Qinqingdi, and then he himself waited here. In a while, Mo Tianlin would also come. However, after waiting for a few hours, the Mo family's people did come, but only the Mo family's master came. There was no sign of Mo Tianlin. The three looked at each other and didn't say anything. It was obvious that Mo Tianlin couldn't come. He didn't have the key. The Mo family was one of the 9 great aristocratic families, but now it seemed that the Mo family's foundation was worrying. The entire Mo family actually only had one key. However, Mo Tianlin didn't come, but Luo Feiheng did. I say, you guys aren't all waiting for me, are you? I'm very touched, but it's impossible for me to repay you with my body. Luo Feiheng was wearing a pure white warrior suit, which outlined her curvaceous figure, but her heroic spirit was even stronger than before. She also had a cheerful smile on her face, which was much better than when she was forced to marry by the Luo family. Obviously, she had walked out of the shadow. Seeing Luo Feiheng, Chu Xiu asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" After leaving the Luo family, Luo Feiheng could only be considered a rogue cultivator. Of course, even if Luo Feiheng was in the Luo family now, the Luo family wouldn't give Luo Feiheng the opportunity to enter the minor Fan Tian. It's the key that Master Mo Yezi gave me. Luo Feiheng shrugged and said, Master Mo Yezi is a great grandmaster of blacksmithing. His collection is definitely more profound than you can imagine. Master Mo Yezi only asked me to enter the minor Fan Tian to take a look. If there are any rare ores or other things inside, I'll just bring them to him. Chu Xiu nodded. Mo Yezi almost treated Luo Feiheng as his own daughter, so the key to the minor Fan Tian wasn't very useful to Master Mo Yezi. Therefore, it was normal for him to give it to Luo Feiheng. Since Mo Tianlin wasn't here, Chu Xiu and the others chatted for a while and decided on a location to meet up. Just as Chu Xiu and the others were about to enter the minor Fan Tian, a voice filled with hatred came from behind Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu looked back and saw a group of white-clothed cultivators holding long swords walking straight towards him. Among them was Chu Xiu's old acquaintance, Fang Qishao. There was also Sword King City Xingjian Hall's head, Formless Sword Bai Qian, whom Chu Xiu had seen at the Righteous and Demonic Path battle on Floating Jade Mountain. As for the guy who was looking at Chu Xiu with hatred, he was Lin Kaiyun, a young elite who was second only to Fang Qishao in Sword King City. Back in the Guanzhong torture room, Lin Kaiyun was defeated by Chu Xiu on the spot, causing his state of mind to be destroyed. Since then, he had been unable to recover. To be honest, this was the first time Chu Xiu had seen someone with such a fragile state of mind like Lin Kaiyun. As a cultivator, ups and downs, winning and losing were very normal things. To put it bluntly, Lin Kaiyun was a sore loser. Chu Xiu had long forgotten such a character. However, Chu Xiu had not expected to see him again. Lin Kaiyun seemed to have recovered from the blow of the past, and his strength had even risen to the 5 Qis gathering in the origin stage. However, there was still a long way to go before Fang Qishao. Glancing at Lin Kaiyun, who was looking at him with hatred, Chu Xiu greeted Fang Qishao, Brother Fang, long time no see. Fang Qishao shrugged and said, long time no see. Also, congratulations on stepping into the unity of heaven and man realm, Brother Lu. Lin Kaiyun saw that Chu Xiu was actually chatting with Fang Qishao, and his face turned black with anger. Senior Brother Fang. This guy is Chu Xiu. The one who had enmity with my Sword King City in the past, Chu Xiu. You didn't draw a clear line with him, but now you're talking and laughing here. What's the meaning of this? In the eyes of outsiders, or those who were familiar with him like Chu Xiu, 7th young Master Fang did not have anything reliable about him other than his own strength. But at this time, after listening to Lin Kaiyun, Fang Qishao's face suddenly sank and he said coldly, draw a clear line? Lin Kaiyun, are you still dreaming or have you slept too much? Who gave you the qualifications to talk to me like this? You're the one who has enmity with Chu Xiu. I won't stop you if you want to seek revenge. Considering that we're from the same sect, I'll just give you a word of advice. Don't court death. Now you want to provoke me to help you? Do you really think I'm an idiot? Solve your enmity on your own. Don't drag Sword King City into everything. Sword King City's reputation is ruined by people like you. Fang Qishao, who had always been very indecent, suddenly became angry at this time, and the atmosphere was unusually oppressive. Bai Qian frowned and said, enough, Lin Kaiyun. Don't cause trouble. I'm giving you a chance this time not to cause trouble, but to let you search for opportunities in Little Fan Heaven. Hearing Bai Qian's words, even if Lin Kaiyun was dissatisfied with Chu Xiu, he could only endure it. Fang Qishao casually waved his hand at Chu Xiu and the others, and then directly followed Bai Qian into Little Fan Heaven. After walking for a while, Bai Qian said in a deep voice, "Seventh young master, Chu Xiu isn't an easy person to deal with. He doesn't walk the right path, so it's best for you to avoid contact with him. Although Lin Kaiyun is slightly immature, he's still your junior brother, the future of Sword King City." Fang Qishao lazily sheathed his sword behind him and said, "What's the right path and what's the wrong path? The one who walks the fastest and farthest is the right path. There aren't many people in the underworld that can enter my eyes, so if we can't be friends, then we can only be enemies. As for Lin Kaiyun, forgive me for speaking bluntly, but if Sword King City's future depends on trash like him, then it will have no future." You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.